I stood on my own front porch, trembling not from the pain in my surgically repaired hip, but from the cold realization that my key no longer fit the lock. My son and his wife did not just change the deadbolt. They sold the one thing that held my soul together. My late wife's 1968 Steinway piano. They thought I was just a feeble old man they could manage. They did not know I had been recording every conversation in that house for the last 6 months. Before we get into how I made them pay for every single tear, tell me in the comments if you have ever had family mistake your silence for weakness. Like and subscribe if you believe respect is earned, not inherited. My name is Elijah Thorne, and at 73 years old, I never expected to be standing on the wrong side of my own front door. The Chicago wind has a way of cutting right through you, especially when you are leaning on a cane and feeling more vulnerable than you have in your entire life. The yellow taxi that brought me home from the rehabilitation center was already fading down the street, leaving me alone with my bag and the silence of the neighborhood. I looked at the heavy oak door of the Victorian house I bought 40 years ago. This house was built on royalty checks from jazz records and nights spent in smoky studios making sure the bass line was tight. It was the only home my son Dante had ever known. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my brass key ring. The metal felt cold and familiar against my thumb. I slid the key into the lock, expecting that satisfying click I had heard thousands of times. Instead, there was resistance. Hard metal hitting hard metal. I jiggled it, thinking maybe my grip was weak from the medication. Nothing. I tried again, putting my shoulder into it, but the door remained solid, immovable. That is when I noticed the hardware was different. My old brass lock with the patina of time was gone. In its place sat a sleek black digital keypad glowing with a faint blue light like some alien eye staring back at me. Confusion washed over me first, followed quickly by a rising heat in my chest. I pressed the doorbell. I could hear the chime echo inside, deep and hollow. A full minute passed. I shifted my weight off my bad leg, gritting my teeth against the dull throb in my hip. Finally, the lock buzzed and the door swung open. It wasn't my son Dante. It was Jessica, my daughter-in-law. She stood there framing herself in the doorway, wearing one of those beige linen outfits that looked like it cost more than my first car but looked like a potato sack. She was smiling, but it was not a smile that reached her eyes. It was the kind of smile a shark gives before it takes a bite. "Oh, Elijah," she said, using my first name instead of Dad, or Mr. Thorne, just like she always did to establish dominance. "You are here early. We completely forgot to send you the code." I stared at her, gripping my cane until my knuckles turned ash gray. "You forgot to give me the key to my own house, Jessica. And why is there a keypad on my door?" She stepped back, gesturing for me to enter with a wave of her hand that felt more like a dismissal than a welcome. "Oh, keys are so archaic, Elijah," she said, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness she uses on her life coaching clients. "We installed the smart lock for your safety. You know how seniors get with memory issues. We didn't want you losing a key and compromising the security of the home." Security of the home. I wanted to laugh, but the air left my lungs the moment I stepped across the threshold. I walked into the foyer and the smell hit me first. The scent of my house used to be old wood lemon polish and the faint lingering aroma of gumbo spices. Now it smelled sterile, like rubbing alcohol and that burning sage nonsense Jessica was always obsessed with. I limped into the living room and stopped dead. My eyes went instinctively to the bay window overlooking the street. For 30 years, that spot was occupied by Ruby's baby grand Steinway. It was a beast of a piano, black as midnight, with keys that had sung the blues, gospel, and soul since before Dante was born. It was where Ruby wrote her biggest hits. It was where I sat on nights when I missed her so much I could not breathe just to run my fingers over the wood she had touched. It was gone. The space was empty. Just a vast stretch of hardwood floor that looked naked and ashamed. You could still see the faint indentations in the varnish where the heavy brass legs had stood for decades like phantom limbs. I stood there freezing. The pain in my hip vanished, replaced by a phantom pain in my heart that felt like a sledgehammer. I turned to Jessica slowly. My voice was low, a deep rumble that used to command session musicians to silence. "Where is it, Jessica? Where is Ruby's piano?" She walked past me, plucking a piece of invisible lint off the sofa, acting as if she hadn't just gutted the sanctuary of my existence. "Oh," that she said casually, not even looking at me. "We let it go." "You let it go," I repeated the words, tasting like bile in my mouth. "Yes, Elijah." She turned to face me, folding her arms. "Look at this room. Do you see how much more open it feels?" That piano was massive. It was blocking the energy flow. Plus, it gathers so much dust and mold, which is terrible for your respiratory recovery. She was talking about my wife's legacy like it was a dirty air filter. I did not scream. I learned a long time ago in this business that the loudest man in the room is usually the weakest. I kept my tempo steady. "You sold it." "We rehomed it," she corrected me quickly. "To someone who will actually use it." "You haven't played since the funeral, Elijah. It was just sitting there taking up space. We are embracing a minimalist aesthetic now. Less clutter means a clearer mind. It is part of the wellness environment I am creating for your recovery. Minimalist, rehomed, wellness. Every word was a dagger wrapped in silk. She spoke as if she had done me a favor, as if erasing the last physical giant of my wife's presence was a health benefit. "Where is Dante?" I asked. "He is busy in the kitchen making you a smoothie," she said, blocking my path slightly. "He agrees with me, Elijah. We talked about this. We need to modernize. You are going to be limited in your mobility, so we need clear walking paths. No obstacles. No obstacles." I looked at the empty space again. That piano wasn't an obstacle. It was the heart of this house. And if the heart was gone, that meant the body was dead. I looked at Jessica, really looked at her. I saw the calculation in her eyes. This wasn't about dust. This wasn't about my hip. This wasn't about minimalism. A Steinway Model B from 1968 does not just get rehomed. It gets sold. And it gets sold for a lot of money. My grip on the cane tightened. I could hear clinking in the kitchen. Dante was hiding. My son, the boy I raised to be a man, was hiding behind a blender because he didn't have the spine to look me in the eye and tell me he sold his mother's soul for cash. I took a breath. A long, slow inhale through my nose, filling my lungs with the sterile, sage-scented air of this new regime. They thought they had cleared the path for me. They thought they had removed an obstacle. But standing there in the middle of that empty living room, I realized something terrifyingly clear. I was the obstacle. And this wasn't a renovation. This was a coup. I looked at Jessica and forced the muscles in my face to relax. I forced a tired old man's nod. "I see," I said, letting my shoulders slump, pretending the fight had left me. "Maybe you are right. It is. Very spacious." Jessica's shoulders dropped. She smiled that victorious shark smile again. "Exactly. You will see, Elijah. Once you get used to the new energy, you will thank us. Now why don't you go rest in the downstairs study? We set up a bed for you there so you don't have to climb the stairs. The downstairs study. My office. My archives." I didn't say another word. I just tapped my cane on the floor, the sound echoing loudly in the empty room, a lonely percussive beat in a song that had just turned violent. I started walking toward the study, knowing exactly what I would find there, but knowing I had to play my part. They wanted a feeble old man. I would give them one, until I was ready to drop the beat on them. I turned away from the empty space where my wife's piano used to be and started moving toward the staircase. My hip was screaming with every step, a dull, throbbing fire that shot up my spine, but I needed to get to my bedroom. I needed my own bed. I needed to see the picture of Ruby that sat on the nightstand, the one taken at the Newport Jazz Festival in 1972. I just wanted to close my door and pretend this nightmare wasn't happening. But before I could even reach the banister, Jessica sidestepped in front of me. She didn't move fast, but she moved with authority, like a bouncer at a club she owned. She held up a manicured hand, her palm flat against the air between us. "Ah, Elijah, stop right there," she said, her voice dropping into that patronizing register she used when talking to toddlers or stubborn pets. "You cannot go upstairs." I gripped my cane, feeling the sweat pool in my palm. "This is my house, Jessica. My bedroom is upstairs. Move out of the way." She shook her head, her earrings jingling softly. "Not anymore. The doctor was very clear about your recovery protocol. No stairs. Absolutely no unnecessary strain on the hip joint. We can't have you falling and becoming a liability to yourself, can we?" I looked at Dante. He was still hovering in the kitchen doorway, wiping a perfectly clean counter with a rag, refusing to meet my eyes. "Dante!" I barked. My voice cracked slightly, betraying my exhaustion. "Tell your wife to step aside." Dante looked up, his face pale and sweaty. "She's right, Dad. It's for your own good. We moved your things. Moved my things." The phrase hung in the air like toxic smoke. "We set up a recovery suite for you on the ground floor," Jessica said, gesturing toward the back of the house. "In your old office. It's much more practical, closer to the kitchen and the bathroom. Minimal movement required. My office. The room where I had framed my first royalty check. The room where I kept the master tapes." I didn't argue. I didn't have the energy to fight two people physically. I turned and limped down the hallway, the rubber tip of my cane squeaking against the hardwood. When I pushed open the door to my study, I didn't see a recovery suite. I saw a storage unit. My mahogany desk, the one I had sat at for 30 years, was pushed into the corner, piled high with boxes marked donations. My leather armchair was gone. The bookshelves, once filled with biographies of Ellington and Coltrane and legal textbooks on copyright law, were stripped bare. The books were stacked haphazardly on the floor, collecting dust. And in the middle of the room, right where my Persian rug used to be, sat a twin-sized air mattress. It wasn't even a real bed. It was one of those inflatable things you buy for $20 when an unexpected guest crashes on your floor. It was low to the ground. For a man with a broken hip, getting down to that level was agony. Getting up would be a miracle. "This is it?" I asked, staring at the plastic mattress. "This is the suite?" "It is temporary, Elijah," Jessica said from the doorway, leaning against the frame as if she were bored. "Plus, the air support is actually better for spinal alignment. We read about it on a wellness blog." I sat down on the edge of the flimsy mattress. It sagged under my weight, letting out a wheezing hiss of air. I felt humiliated, small. This was how you treat a dog you are planning to put down, not a father who built the roof over your head. I looked up at Dante. He had finally shuffled into the room, standing behind his wife like a shadow. He looked older than his 38 years, but not wiser. Just worn out. Seeing him there, hiding behind Jessica, triggered a memory so sharp it almost blinded me. 11 months ago. That was it. Just 11 months. I sat at that mahogany desk when it was still clean, and Dante sat across from me, weeping into his hands. He had maxed out 5 credit cards, $50,000 in debt, trying to launch some cryptocurrency startup that turned out to be a scam. The collectors were calling his job. He was going to lose everything. "Dad, please," he had begged me, tears running down his face. "I swear I'll pay you back. I just need a lifeline. Don't tell Jessica. She'll leave me." I didn't lecture him. I didn't shame him. I wrote the check. $50,000 from my retirement savings. I wiped his slate clean because that is what a father does. I bought his freedom. And this was how he repaid me, by putting me on a leaky air mattress in a room full of boxes. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't see my son. I saw a stranger who owed me a lot of money. "Dante," I said, my voice low and steady. "Yeah, Dad." "The piano." He flinched. He actually took a half step back. "What about it? Who did you sell it to?" He looked at Jessica for help, but she was busy typing something on her phone, ignoring him. She had already won the battle for the room. The details didn't interest her. I found a guy online," Dante stammered. "A collector. Or a dealer. I don't know, he had a truck." "How much, Dante?" He swallowed hard. "Dad, it doesn't matter, it was old. The keys were yellowing, the finish was chipped." "How much?" $4,000, he whispered. The room went silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator in the next room and the blood rushing in my ears. $4,000. I closed my eyes. That piano was a 1968 Steinway Model B with an ebony satin finish. Ruby had chosen it herself at the factory in New York. We had it appraised 5 years ago for insurance purposes. It was valued at $82,000. And that was just the wood and strings. The sentimental value, the fact that Ruby Thorne, the queen of Chicago soul, had composed her platinum album on those keys, that made it priceless. My son had sold a legacy for the price of a used Honda Civic. "You sold your mother's Steinway for $4,000, I repeated, letting the number hang in the air like a curse. "We needed the cash, Dad," Dante burst out, suddenly defensive. "Do you know how much it costs to maintain this big old house? The heating bills, the property tax, and security. We needed to upgrade the security." "Security?" I asked. "Yes. That smart lock on the front door wasn't cheap. And the cameras. We used the piano money to make the house safe for you." I started to laugh. It was a dry, rasping sound that hurt my chest. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. They sold the most valuable thing in the house to buy a lock that kept me out of it. They stripped the soul of the home to buy a plastic keypad. "You got robbed, Dante," I said quietly. "You let a stranger walk in here and steal your mother's heritage for pennies. You are not just a thief. You are a fool." "Hey!" Jessica snapped, looking up from her phone. "Watch your tone." Dante handled that negotiation perfectly. We cleared the space. That is what matters. "Now get some rest. I don't want to hear any more negativity today. My vibrations are already low enough dealing with your hospital transfer." She grabbed Dante's arm and pulled him out of the room. He didn't look back. He didn't say sorry. He just let himself be dragged away, leaving me sitting on a deflating mattress in the ruins of my own life. The door clicked shut. I stared at the wood grain. $4,000. They thought I was weak. They thought I was senile. They thought I didn't know the value of things. But as I sat there, listening to them whispering in the hallway, I realized something. They had made a fatal mistake. They thought the piano was just furniture. They didn't know about the compartment. They didn't know about the false bottom under the key bed where Ruby used to hide her composition notebooks. I reached down and touched the burner phone hidden in my sock. I hoped the buyer hadn't found it yet. Because if that notebook was still in that piano, Dante hadn't just sold an instrument. He had sold the rights to unreleased songs worth millions, and I was going to get them back. But first, I had to survive the night on this floor without breaking my other hip. I lay back, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in years, I stopped thinking like a father. I started thinking like a producer. And in this production, Dante and Jessica were about to get cut from the track. Here is the detailed script for Part 3. I waited until the house settled into a quiet hum before I made my move. The air mattress was slowly losing pressure underneath me, sinking my hips closer to the cold hardwood floor, but I ignored the discomfort. My focus was on the vintage rotary phone sitting on the corner of the desk. It was one of the few things they hadn't packed away, probably because they thought it looked decorative. It was my lifeline. I needed to call Saul. Saul Berkowitz had been my attorney since 1975. He was 80 years old, deaf in one ear and sharper than a razor blade. If anyone could stop this hijacking of my life, it was him. I rolled off the mattress, gritting my teeth as pain shot through my leg. I pulled myself up using the edge of the desk, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I reached for the receiver, my hand trembling not from age, but from adrenaline. I held it to my ear, expecting the familiar dial tone that sounded like hope. Silence. Dead silence. Not the static of a bad connection, but the absolute void of a disconnected line. I tapped the hook switch once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. I followed the cord down the back of the desk. It was still plugged into the wall jack. That meant they hadn't just unplugged it. They had cut the service at the box outside. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I reached for my iPad, which I had left on top of a stack of books. I tapped the screen. The Wi-Fi icon was grayed out. A box popped up asking for a password. I typed in the password I had used for 10 years, Ellington 1968, incorrect password. I typed it again slowly, making sure my fat fingers hit the right keys. Incorrect password. The door opened behind me. I didn't turn around fast enough. I couldn't. Jessica walked in holding a tray with a glass of water and a small paper cup containing my pain pills. She saw the receiver off the hook. She saw the iPad in my hand. She didn't look angry. She looked disappointed, like a kindergarten teacher catching a child with a prohibited toy. "Oh, Elijah," she sighed, setting the tray down on a dusty box. "I told you we need to focus on recovery, not distractions." "My phone is dead, Jessica," I said, leaning heavily against the desk. "And the internet is down. I need to call my lawyer. I have business to attend to." Jessica clasped her hands together and gave me that pitying smile again. That smile was starting to feel like a physical blow. "We disconnected the landline, Elijah. Nobody uses landlines anymore. It was just an unnecessary expense bleeding your account dry. And as for the internet, we changed the password. You did what I asked," my voice rising. "We are putting you on a digital detox," she said, emphasizing the words as if they were a medical diagnosis. "The blue light from screens is terrible for your circadian rhythms, especially after surgery. It raises cortisol levels. You need absolute mental rest. No news, no email, no stress. Just you and your healing process." "This is not a detox," I growled. This is isolation. You are cutting me off from the world. It is for your own good, she said, stepping closer and taking the iPad from my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. You get so agitated when you read the news. Dante and I decided that for the next few weeks we will handle all external communications. If there is an emergency, we will tell you. Otherwise, you just relax. She slipped the iPad under her arm. Now take your pills. Dinner will be ready in an hour. She turned and walked out, taking my connection to the outside world with her. The lock on the door clicked. I stood there staring at the closed door. They were systematically erasing me. First my history, then my comfort, now my voice. I looked at the pills in the paper cup. I flushed them down the small sink in the corner. I needed a clear head. Pain was better than the fog they wanted to keep me in. I realized then that fighting them with anger wouldn't work. Anger was predictable. Anger gave them a reason to medicate me, to restrain me, to tell the doctors I was becoming aggressive. If I wanted to survive, I had to change my tune. I had to improvise. I had to play the only role that would make them lower their guard. I had to become the helpless old man they thought I was. 2 hours later, the smell of garlic and rosemary drifted under the door. It was rich and savory, the kind of smell that wakes up your salivary glands. My stomach growled violently. I hadn't eaten anything but dry toast since the morning. The key turned in the lock. Dante walked in first, carrying a folding card table. He refused to look at me, keeping his eyes fixed on his shoes. Jessica followed, carrying 2 trays. "We thought we would have a family dinner in here with you," she said brightly. "Since you can't come to the dining room, we brought the dining room to you. Isn't that nice, Dante?" "Yeah, nice," Dante mumbled, unfolding the table. They set the trays down. On Dante's tray and Jessica's tray sat thick, juicy ribeye steaks seared to perfection. Beside the meat were roasted potatoes glistening with duck fat and asparagus spears drizzled with hollandaise sauce. The aroma filled the dusty room, making me dizzy with hunger. Then Jessica placed a plastic bowl in front of me. Inside was a gray, lumpy substance. It looked like wet cement. "What is this?" I asked, staring at the bowl. "Oatmeal," she said cheerfully, slicing into her steak, "with flaxseed and unsweetened almond milk. Red meat is terrible for inflammation, Elijah. And with your high blood pressure and the surgery, your body can't process heavy fats right now. This is heart healthy. It will keep your arteries clean." I looked at the steak on her fork. A drop of red juice fell from the meat onto her porcelain plate. Then I looked at my bowl of gray sludge. Dante was cutting his meat aggressively, the knife screeching against the plate. He shoved a large piece into his mouth, chewing rapidly as if he wanted to get it over with. "This is humiliating," I said quietly. "It is nutrition," Jessica corrected me. "Eat up. You need your strength." I picked up my spoon. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to grab the steak off her plate and throw it against the wall. But I remembered the plan. I forced my hand to tremble. I let the spoon rattle against the side of the plastic bowl. I let my jaw go slack and allowed a confused, glossy look to wash over my eyes. Is it Tuesday?" I asked, my voice quavering. "Did Ruby say she was coming back for dinner?" Dante stopped chewing. He looked at me, his eyes wide with sudden fear. "Dad, Ruby is dead." I blinked slowly, acting as if I was processing difficult information. "Oh, right, I forgot. My head, it feels so heavy." Jessica exchanged a glance with Dante, a look of triumph. "See," she seemed to be saying, "he is losing it. The plan is working. Just eat your oatmeal, Elijah," she said, her voice losing some of its edge. "It will help you sleep." I took a bite of the oatmeal. It was cold. It tasted like wet cardboard and despair. But I ate it. I ate every spoonful, letting a little bit dribble down my chin, which I wiped away with a shaking hand. I watched them eat my food in my house, paid for with my money, while I sat on an air mattress eating slop. I memorized every detail, the way Jessica held her fork like a weapon, the way Dante drank his wine too fast. I was recording this scene not on tape, but in the deep archive of my memory, where I kept all the grievances I would one day settle. When they finished, they packed up the dishes. "Good boy," Jessica said, patting me on the head as if I were a retriever. "You finished it all. We will leave the door unlocked so you can use the bathroom down the hall, but don't try to go outside. The alarm system is armed, and if you trip it, the police will come, and it will be very embarrassing for you." I nodded, staring at my knees. "Good night," I whispered. They left, closing the door, but not locking it. They were getting careless. They thought the enemy was defeated. I waited. I waited until I heard the television go on in the living room upstairs. I waited until the house groaned with the settling of the night. Then I moved. I didn't move like a 90-year-old man. I moved like a drummer finding the pocket. I slid off the mattress and grabbed my left shoe. It was a sturdy leather brogue, orthopedically designed, but with a custom modification I had added years ago when I was touring Europe and didn't trust the hotel safes. I pried up the inner sole at the heel. Underneath, nestled in a hollowed-out cavity wrapped in a soft cloth, was a Nokia phone. It was 10 years old, the battery held a charge for a week, and it was untraceable. I pressed the power button. The screen lit up green. 1 bar of signal. It was enough. My fingers, which had been trembling during dinner, were now steady as rock. I didn't text Dante. I didn't text the police. I texted Saul. I typed slowly, deliberately. They cut the lines. House is a prison. Secure the assets. Check the recording devices I planted in January. Game on. I hit send. I watched the little envelope icon fly off the screen. Then I turned off the phone, wrapped it back in the cloth, and shoved it back into the heel of my shoe. I lay back on the air mattress. My hip was throbbing. My stomach was full of cold oats, and my heart was breaking. But for the first time in 24 hours, I smiled in the dark. Jessica wanted a minimalist life. I was about to strip her existence down to the bone. The next evening my home was invaded. I do not use that word lightly. It was not a gathering. It was not a celebration. It was a hostile takeover disguised as a cocktail party. I was lying on the air mattress in the study staring at a water stain on the ceiling when Jessica burst in. She was wearing a shimmering silver dress that looked like chainmail. She held a pile of clothes in her arms, but they were not my clothes. They were not my pressed slacks or my silk shirts or the velvet smoking jacket I had worn on album covers. It was a pair of flannel pajamas, blue plaid with oversized buttons, the kind of thing you buy for a toddler or a man who has given up on life. "Time to get dressed, Elijah," she said, throwing the bundle at me. "We have guests arriving in 30 minutes. I sat up slowly. "I am not wearing pajamas to a party, Jessica. I have a suit in the closet upstairs. Get me my suit." She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that grated on my nerves like a bow played on a dry string. "Don't be ridiculous. You are recovering. People will think we are monsters if we force you into a suit. You need to look comfortable. You need to look rested." She meant I needed to look weak. She needed me to look the part of the invalid dependent so she could play the role of the saintly caregiver. It was all about optics. If I looked dignified in a suit, her narrative of the burden she was carrying would fall apart. I put on the pajamas. The flannel felt itchy and cheap against my skin. It felt like a costume for a play I never auditioned for. Then Dante rolled in a wheelchair. "I don't need that," I said, pointing my cane at the contraption. "I can walk." "It is just for tonight," Dad, Dante said, avoiding my eyes as usual. "There are a lot of people. We don't want you getting bumped. Just sit in the chair. Please. For Jessica. For Jessica." Everything was for Jessica. I sat in the chair. I let them wheel me out of my office and into the living room. The transformation was complete. The room was unrecognizable. My heavy oak furniture was gone, replaced by sharp, angular white sofas that looked like they belonged in a dentist's waiting room. The warm lighting was gone, replaced by harsh halogen track lights. And the music. My God, the music. Instead of the soulful warmth of Coltrane or the complex rhythms of Monk, there was this mindless, repetitive electronic thumping playing from a hidden speaker. It had no soul. It had no heartbeat. The guests began to arrive. They were not my friends. They were not the musicians and poets and professors who used to fill this house with laughter and debate. These were Jessica's people. Women with frozen foreheads and men in suits that were too tight holding glasses of white wine by the stem. They looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and repulsion, as if I were a piece of abstract art they didn't quite understand. Jessica parked my wheelchair in the corner near the fireplace like a decorative plant. "Everyone," she announced, clapping her hands for attention. "I want you to meet my father-in-law, Elijah. He is recovering from a very serious surgery, and his memory isn't quite what it used to be, so please be gentle with him." A chorus of sympathetic coos went up from the crowd. "Poor dear," someone whispered. "So tragic when the mind goes before the body," said another. I gripped the armrests of the wheelchair. My mind was sharper than any of theirs. I could recount the liner notes of every album produced in Chicago between 1960 and 1980. I could recite the copyright statutes of the state of Illinois backward. But I said nothing. I let my jaw hang loose. I stared vacantly at a spot on the wall. I played the part. Jessica moved through the room like a queen bee buzzing from group to group, accepting praise for her renovation. "You have done wonders with this place, Jessica," a woman with a nasal voice said. "It feels so modern, so open." "Thank you." Jessica beamed, sipping her champagne. It was a lot of work clearing out the old energy. This house was so dark before, so cluttered with heavy things, heavy things. She meant my life. She meant my history. I watched Dante. He was weaving through the crowd, holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres, acting like a servant in his own father's house. He looked miserable. Every time he passed me, he looked away. He knew this was wrong. He knew this was a violation. But his spine had turned to jelly years ago. Then it happened, the moment that almost made me break character. A tall woman with short blonde hair wandered over to the hallway leading to the kitchen. That hallway was the only part of the house Jessica hadn't fully sterilized yet. Hanging on the wall were 3 framed gold records. My records, the ones I produced for Ruby in 1974. They were the tangible proof that we had touched the stars. The woman squinted at them, then called out, "Jessica, darling, what are these?" Jessica floated over her glass, clinking against her rings. "Oh, those," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Just some old memorabilia from Elijah's past. His wife was a singer or something locally. Ruby Thorne toured Europe 3 times. She opened for Ray Charles." "They are kind of retro," the woman said, wrinkling her nose. "But they don't really match your minimalist vibe, do they? The gold is so gaudy against the white walls." I know, Jessica sighed. "I have been meaning to take them down. I actually have a painter coming next week. We are going to paint over this whole hallway, pure alabaster white. I might just put the records in storage or maybe sell them if they are worth anything. Though I doubt vinyl culture cares about obscure local acts anymore. Paint over them." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. She wasn't just stealing my house. She was erasing my existence. She wanted to whitewash the legacy of a black woman who had fought tooth and nail to be heard in this industry. She wanted to turn Ruby's shrine into a blank white wall. The rage rose in my throat, hot and acidic. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to overturn the wheelchair. I wanted to scream that those records were worth more than this entire room of shallow people combined. But I felt the weight of the Nokia phone in my pajama pocket. It was recording. I had started the voice memo app before they wheeled me out. "Patience, Elijah. Patience. The best jazz is about the space between the notes." The silence before the crash. I slumped further into the wheelchair, letting my head loll to the side. I closed my eyes, pretending to doze off. "Look, he is asleep," the blonde woman said. "Poor old thing." "Let him sleep," Jessica said. "He barely knows where he is half the time. Yesterday he thought the microwave was a television." The group laughed, a cruel, tinkling sound. Jessica led the blonde woman and another friend, a man who looked like a real estate agent, over to the window seat just a few feet away from my chair. They thought I was unconscious. They thought I was a vegetable. So the real estate agent lowered his voice, but I could hear every syllable. "You are sitting on a gold mine here, Jessica. This neighborhood is gentrifying fast. A Victorian of this size with the original woodwork stripped and modernized. You could list this for $2.2 million easily." "I know," Jessica whispered, and her voice wasn't fake sweet anymore. It was cold and hungry. "That is the plan. Dante is sentimental, but he is broke. He will do what I say. We just need to wait a little longer." "Wait for what the blonde asked. Wait for nature to take its course," Jessica said. She took a sip of her drink. "The doctor said the hip surgery put a massive strain on his heart. He is 73. He is stressed. He is confused. I give him 6 months. Maybe less if we keep him comfortable downstairs. Once he is gone, we sell the place, take the cash, and move to a condo in Florida. No more stairs. No more old man smell. Just $2 million in freedom." There it was, the confession. She wasn't just waiting for me to die. She was banking on it. She was actively creating an environment to accelerate it. My hand inside my pocket tightened around the phone. I had it. I had the motive. I had the malice. I had the premeditation. I kept my eyes closed, but my mind was racing. $2 million. She put a price tag on my death.
Jessica moved away laughing at something the agent said. The party continued. The music thumped on, but the dynamic had shifted. I was no longer the victim in the wheelchair. I was the spy in the enemy camp. I sat there for another hour listening to them drink my wine and plan my funeral. When Dante finally came to wheel me back to my cell, he looked down at me with sad eyes. "You okay, Dad?" he whispered. I opened my eyes and looked at him. I looked deep into his soul, searching for any remnant of the boy I raised. "I am tired, Dante," I said, my voice raspy. "I am very tired." I didn't tell him I wasn't tired of living. I was tired of him. He pushed me back into the study and helped me onto the air mattress. He turned off the light. "Sleep tight, Dad," he said, closing the door. I waited for the click of the lock. Then I pulled out the phone. I stopped the recording. I played back the last 2 minutes, holding the speaker to my ear. I give him 6 months, maybe less. Just $2 million and freedom. The audio was crisp, clear, undeniable. I lay back in the dark, clutching the phone like a weapon. Jessica wanted to paint the walls white. She wanted to erase Ruby. She wanted to erase me. But she forgot one thing about the blues. You can't kill it. You can't paint over it. It comes from the gut, and when it comes out, it brings the house down. I stared at the ceiling, and for the first time since I came home, I didn't feel pain in my hip. I felt power. Let them have their party. Let them drink their wine. Tomorrow I would send this file to Saul, and then we would see who gets erased. The morning sun hit the dusty windows of my study with a harsh, unforgiving light. I had barely slept. The air mattress had deflated halfway through the night, leaving my hip resting almost directly on the hardwood floor. My body felt like a rusted machine, every joint grinding against the next, but my mind was humming with the clarity of a hi-hat cymbal cutting through a bass line. I could hear them moving upstairs, heavy footsteps, the clatter of dishes. They were hung over. I could tell by the drag in their steps. Last night's party had gone on until 2 in the morning, a celebration of a victory they thought they had already won. They were already spending the money they expected to get from selling my life. I sat up, groaning as I pulled my legs over the side of the mattress. I reached for my cane and hoisted myself up, waiting for the dizziness to pass. I needed coffee. Real coffee. Not that instant sludge they had been giving me. I unlocked the door and made my way to the kitchen. The house smelled of stale wine and expensive perfume that had turned sour overnight. The living room was a wreck. Empty glasses sat on the floor like tombstones. A coaster had been ground into the white rug Jessica loved so much. I looked at it and felt a petty spark of satisfaction. In the kitchen, Dante was sitting at the island, his head in his hands. He looked terrible. His eyes were bloodshot and his skin had that gray, pasty look of a man who is aging faster than he should. When he saw me, he jumped a little, straightening up as if I were a drill sergeant. "Morning, Dad," he croaked. "You're up early." I didn't answer immediately. I limped over to the coffee maker. It was one of those complicated machines that cost more than my first amplifier. I ignored it and found the old French press in the back of the cabinet. "Just getting some water," I lied. "Let me get it for you," Dante said, rushing over. He was too eager, too helpful. He was vibrating with nervous energy. I waved him off. "I can handle a faucet, Dante. Sit down." He sat back down, drumming his fingers on a thick manila envelope lying on the counter. I had seen that envelope before. It was the one he had been guarding last night, the closing documents. Jessica walked in a moment later. She looked perfect, of course, not a hair out of place, wearing a sharp white power suit. She didn't look like someone who had been drinking champagne until dawn. She looked like a predator who had already sighted her prey for the day. "Good morning, Elijah," she said, pouring herself a glass of green juice from a pitcher. "How did you sleep?" "Like a king," I said, pressing down on the plunger of the coffee pot. The smell of dark roast filled the air, the only honest thing in this room. "That's wonderful," she said, leaning against the counter next to Dante. She tapped the envelope with a manicured fingernail. "Dante, honey, why don't you talk to your father while he's having his coffee? We have a busy schedule today." Dante swallowed hard. He looked at me, then at the envelope, then back at me. He looked like a child who had broken a window and was trying to blame the wind. "Dad," he started, his voice trembling slightly. We need to sort out some paperwork. You know, with the surgery and the insurance companies. It's a mess. They are denying some of the claims because of..." Clerical errors. He pushed the envelope toward me. I need you to sign these. It's just standard stuff. Updating your medical proxy so I can talk to the billing department for you. Otherwise, they won't let me fix the errors and you might get stuck with a huge bill. A huge bill. Fear. That was their tactic. Scare the old man with money problems so he signs away his freedom. I took my mug of black coffee and limped over to the island. I sat down slowly, letting the cane rest against my leg. I looked at the envelope. Medical proxy, you say? I asked, taking a slow sip. Yeah, Dante said, sweating now, just authorizing me to handle the insurance. I opened the envelope. My hands were steady, but I forced a slight tremor into my fingers. I pulled out the stack of papers. It was thick. Too thick for a medical proxy. I put on my reading glasses, the ones I kept in my shirt pocket. The top page was indeed a HIPAA release form. Standard. Innocuous. But I didn't stop at the top page. I licked my thumb and turned to the second page. And the third. Dante shifted in his seat. Dad, you don't have to read all that. It's just legalese. Standard boilerplate. I ignored him. I had negotiated contracts with record labels in the 70s who tried to steal publishing rights from artists who couldn't read. I knew what boilerplate looked like, and I knew where the devil hid his details. I turned to page 4. The heading was in bold, capitalized letters, Durable Power of Attorney. I scanned the text. Grants Dante Thorne full authority to manage, sell, or transfer real estate, personal property, and financial assets. Effective immediately. Not contingent upon incapacitation. This wasn't a medical proxy. This was a surrender. If I signed this, Dante could sell the house, empty my bank accounts, and dump me in a state-run facility before lunch. I turned another page. Quitclaim deed. This one transferred the title of the house from the Elijah Thorne Revocable Trust to Dante and Jessica Thorne, joint tenants with rights of survivorship. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. They handed me a loaded gun and asked me to pull the trigger on myself. I looked up. Jessica was watching me with hawk eyes. She wasn't smiling anymore. She was waiting. Is there a problem, Elijah? She asked, her voice sharp. Just sign the designated lines. We are late for an appointment. I looked at Dante. He was staring at the table, refusing to meet my gaze. I remembered Ruby. I remembered the night she died. She grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong for someone so weak. Elijah, she had whispered, I love our son, but he is weak. He has always been water, taking the shape of whatever vessel he is in. And that woman, she is a fox. She will eat him alive, and she will come for the bones. Don't let her take what we built. Promise me. I had promised. I looked at the papers again. I needed time. I couldn't refuse to sign right now without revealing that I was lucid. If I challenged them on the legal terms, they would know I was sharp. They would know their senile old man narrative was false. They would change tactics. They might try something more physical, or they might forge my signature if they got desperate enough. I needed to destroy the papers, but make it look like an accident. I needed to be the clumsy, shaking invalid they wanted me to be. I reached for the pen Dante was holding out. My hand shook violently. I exaggerated the tremor, letting my arm jerk spastically. I can't find the line, I mumbled, my voice quavering. My eyes. So blurry today. Here, let me help, Jessica snapped, reaching over to guide my hand. As she reached out, I jerked my elbow back, knocking into my coffee mug. It wasn't a little spill. It was a deluge. The heavy ceramic mug tipped over, sending a wave of scalding hot black coffee cascading directly onto the stack of documents. Oh no! I cried out, dropping the pen. I am so clumsy! Oh, look at that! The dark liquid soaked into the paper instantly. The ink on the power of attorney form began to bleed. The quitclaim deed turned into a brown, soggy mess. Jessica screamed. It was a guttural, unladylike sound. You stupid old man! She grabbed the papers, trying to shake the liquid off, but it was too late. They were ruined. Sodden pulp. Dante jumped up, grabbing napkins. Dad, are you okay? Did you burn yourself? I sat there, looking at the spreading puddle, pretending to be horrified. I am so sorry, I stammered. My hand. It just spasmed. I ruined the insurance papers. Now I will have to pay the huge bill. Jessica threw the wet clump of paper into the sink with a wet thud. She turned to me, and for a second the mask dropped completely. Her face was twisted in pure, unadulterated rage. Her eyes bulged, her lips pulled back from her teeth. "You did that on purpose," she hissed. I shrank back in my chair, widening my eyes in feigned terror. "What? No, Jessica, why would I? I want to help Dante. I am just old. I am useless.
Dante stepped between us. "Jessica, stop. It was an accident. Look at him. He's shaking." Jessica took a deep breath. She closed her eyes and inhaled through her nose, counting to 10. I could practically hear the gears grinding in her head as she reset her persona. She couldn't attack me in front of Dante. Not yet. She needed him to believe I was the burden, not the victim. She opened her eyes. The smile was back, but it was tight, like a rubber band about to snap. "It's okay, Elijah," she said, her voice trembling with suppressed fury. "Accidents happen. It's just paper. We can print new copies." She looked at the clock. "But we don't have time right now. We have to go. Dante, clean this up. We will handle the signatures tonight. And this time, Elijah, we will use a sippy cup for your coffee." She stormed out of the kitchen, her heels clicking like gunshots on the tile. Dante sighed, wiping up the coffee. "Sorry, Dad, she's just stressed." I watched him. I felt a pang of pity for him, but it was fleeting. He had printed those papers. He had set the trap. "It's okay, son," I said softly. "I understand." I understood perfectly. I had bought myself 12 hours. As Dante threw the soggy remains of the power of attorney into the trash, I mentally checked my own inventory. I had the recording of the party. I had the recording of Jessica screaming just now. I had the knowledge of their legal strategy. And most importantly, I had a plan. Tonight, they would come back with new papers. But tonight, I wouldn't be here to sign them. I waited until Dante left the room to get changed. I reached into the trash can and pulled out one sodden page, the page with the notary stamp block at the bottom. I folded it carefully and put it in my pocket. Evidence. Proof of intent. The coffee was still dripping from the table onto my leg, burning my skin, but I didn't wipe it off. The pain kept me focused. The pain reminded me that I was alive, and as long as I was alive, nobody was taking Ruby's house. I looked at the empty spot where the piano used to be. "Hold on, baby," I whispered. "I'm playing the bridge now. The solo is coming up next." The house finally fell silent at 10 in the morning. I listened to the sounds of my captors leaving the premises. First, it was Dante who shuffled out the door with the heavy tread of a man walking to the gallows. He was going to a job he hated to pay for a lifestyle he could not afford. Then, 20 minutes later, Jessica left. She breezed through the hallway, talking loudly on her phone about needing to realign her chakras and get a hot stone massage to deal with the negative energy I was apparently radiating. The front door slammed shut and the digital lock whirred into place. The sound of her SUV fading down the street was the sweetest music I had heard in weeks. I did not waste a second. I ignored the throbbing in my hip and moved with a speed that would have shocked my doctor. I went straight to the window and peered through the blinds just to be sure. The driveway was empty. The street was clear. I sat down on the floor of the study, not on the mattress but against the wall where the signal was strongest. I pulled the Nokia from my shoe. My hands were shaking, but not from age. They were shaking from the sheer terror of what I might find out. I dialed Saul. He picked up on the second ring. "Talk to me, Saul," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "Tell me you have a lead. Elijah." Saul's voice crackled over the line, rough like sandpaper. "It is good to hear your voice, my friend. You sound better than your texts." "I am running on adrenaline and spite, Saul. Now tell me about the piano. Did you track down the buyer?" I heard the rustling of papers on the other end. Saul never used computers if he could avoid it. He kept files in stacks that defied gravity. "We are working on it, Elijah," he said. "My private investigator is running a trace on the phone number Dante called that day." "But Elijah, I have to ask. I know you loved that Steinway. I know Ruby played it. But why the desperation? We can sue them for the value of the piano later. Why do we need to physically locate it right now?" I closed my eyes and leaned my head back against the wall. I had never told anyone this, not even Saul. It was a secret Ruby and I had kept for 40 years. Saul listened to me carefully. "It is not just a piano. What do you mean, Saul asked, his tone shifting from lawyer to confidant. I took a deep breath. You remember 1979. You remember when Ruby got into that dispute with the label about her publishing rights. They wanted to own everything she wrote in perpetuity. I remember Saul said, nasty business. We settled it, but she was paranoid for years after that. She wasn't paranoid, Saul. She was smart. She stopped writing her songs in the studio. She stopped recording demos on their equipment. She wrote everything by hand in a leather-bound notebook. Lyrics, chord progressions, arrangements. Okay, Saul said slowly. So the notebook is valuable. But surely you kept it in a safe. No, I whispered. A safe is the first place thieves look. A safe is where the IRS looks. Ruby wanted those songs to be safe until she was ready to release them on her own terms. She never got the chance. The silence on the line was heavy. Elijah, where is the notebook? It is in the piano, Saul. There was a pause. In the piano. Under the keybed, I explained. Low A and low B flat. If you press them both down silently and reach under the mahogany frame, there is a small latch. I built it myself. It opens a false bottom. The notebook is inside. My God, Saul breathed. And Saul, that notebook contains 12 completed songs she wrote before she died. The lost sessions. We are talking about unreleased Ruby Thorne originals. With the current market for vintage soul music, the publishing rights on those songs alone are worth $5, maybe $10 million. I heard Saul suck in a breath. And Dante sold it for $4,000, I added, my voice breaking. He sold a winning lottery ticket for the price of a used car, Saul said. Okay. The urgency just went from high to critical. If that piano ends up in a showroom and a technician opens it up to service the action, they will find it. Or worse, if it goes to a refinisher, they might strip it and toss the contents. Find it, Saul. I don't care what it costs. I hung up. The next 2 hours were the longest of my life. I paced the small room as best I could. I looked at the empty space on the floor where my life used to be. I tried to imagine where the piano was. Was it in a warm living room being played by a student? Was it in a dusty warehouse? Was it on a truck bouncing down a potholed road, the delicate action being destroyed with every bump? I remembered the day I built that compartment. Ruby was sitting on the bench humming a melody that would later become Midnight in Chicago. She watched me chisel out the wood from the underside of the piano. You think this is crazy, Elijah? She had asked. I think it's necessary, I had replied. This is our retirement fund, baby. This is our legacy. Nobody touches this but us. She had kissed my forehead. You are my fortress, Elijah. I had failed her. I let the fortress fall. I let the enemy walk right in through the front door and carry the treasure out. My phone buzzed. I snatched it up so fast I almost dropped it. Saul. We found it, Elijah. Where? Is it at Henderson's Music? Is it at the gallery downtown? No, Saul said, and his voice was grim. It is worse than we thought. Dante didn't sell it to a dealer. Dealers ask questions. Dealers want provenance. Dante wanted fast cash with no paper trail. So where is it? I demanded. Craigslist, Elijah. He listed it on Craigslist under Old Piano Must Go ASAP. My stomach turned over. Craigslist. The graveyard of unwanted furniture. Who bought it, Saul? A guy named Miller Saul said, reading from his notes. My investigator pretended to be a buyer looking for parts. He got Miller on the phone. This guy is not a musician, Elijah. He is a flipper, a junk hauler. He buys out estate sales and foreclosures, takes what looks good and dumps the rest. Dumps the rest. The words echoed in my head. Where is the piano now? He has it in a storage locker in the south side. He told my guy he is planning to strip the ivory off the keys because that is the only part he thinks is valuable. He says the wood is too heavy to move again, so he might just chop it up for firewood or sell the legs separately. Firewood. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. My vision blurred. He is going to destroy it, I whispered. He is going to strip it tomorrow morning, Saul said. We have less than 24 hours, Elijah. Buy it, I said. Call him back. Offer him double. Offer him triple. We tried, Elijah. That is the problem. He thinks my investigator is a cop or a fed because we asked too many questions about the ivory. He got spooked and hung up. He blocked the number. If we push him, he might panic and destroy the evidence tonight. So, what do? We have his address, Saul said, the storage unit address. But we can't just break in. That is burglary. We need a legal way to seize it. I am trying to get a judge to sign an emergency injunction, but it is Friday afternoon, Elijah. The courts are closing. I don't have time for judges, Saul. That notebook is the only leverage I have. If Jessica finds out about it, she will burn the piano herself. If Miller destroys it, I lose Ruby forever. Elijah, listen to me. Do not do anything rash. You are physically compromised. I am a father protecting his family. Saul, even the parts of the family that don't deserve it. Send me the address. Elijah. Send me the address, Saul. The line went dead. A moment later, a text message popped up. Miller's U-Store it. Unit 4B. 4500 Western Avenue. I stared at the address. It wasn't far, maybe 5 miles. I looked down at my leg. I looked at the cane. I looked at the locked door of the study. Jessica would be back in 2 hours. She would expect to find me napping on the air mattress. She would expect the docile, broken old man she had created. I stood up. I walked to the window. The sun was shining, but all I could see was red. They took my home. They took my dignity. They tried to take my mind. But they had made a mistake. They thought the value of a man was in his bank account or his ability to run a marathon. They forgot that I was a producer. My job was to fix things. My job was to take a mess and turn it into a hit record. I wasn't going to wait for a judge. I wasn't going to wait for Dante to grow a spine. I was going to get my wife back. I went to the closet where they had shoved my old man clothes. I pushed aside the cardigans and the slacks. In the back, hidden inside the pocket of an old trench coat, I found it, my checkbook. The one account they hadn't found yet because it was under my stage name E.J. Thorne. There was $4,000 in there. I put the checkbook in my pocket. I put the phone in my shoe. I went to the door of the study. It was locked from the outside. Jessica thought she was smart. She thought a simple deadbolt could hold me. But this house was built in 1920. The doors were solid wood, but the hinges were on the inside. I walked over to the toolbox Dante had left in the corner when he was assembling the air mattress. He was so lazy, he hadn't even put it away. I took out a flathead screwdriver and a hammer. I looked at the hinges. "Sorry, Jessica," I whispered, "but your renovation is about to get a little messy." I positioned the screwdriver. I raised the hammer. I wasn't just breaking out of a room, I was breaking out of the role they had cast me in. The first pin popped out with a loud clang that sounded like a gunshot. 1 down, 2 to go. I was coming for you, Ruby. And God help anyone who stood between me and that piano. I locked the door of the study from the inside using the screwdriver to slide the pin back into place. I had returned from my excursion just minutes before Jessica's SUV pulled into the driveway. My hip was screaming in protest and my shirt was damp with sweat, but I felt alive. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't just surviving, I was operating. I lay down on the air mattress for exactly 10 minutes to catch my breath. Then I got up. I wasn't going to hide in this room anymore. If this was a war, I needed to occupy territory. And in any southern household, the most strategic territory is the kitchen. I walked into the kitchen at 5 in the afternoon. The house was quiet. Jessica was upstairs, likely meditating or scrolling through Instagram looking for new ways to spend my money. Dante was not home yet. I opened the refrigerator. It was a depressing landscape of kale almond milk and unidentifiable pastes in glass jars. But deep in the back, behind a wall of kombucha bottles, I found what I was looking for. A bag of frozen shrimp and a package of andouille sausage that Dante must have bought in a moment of weakness and hidden from his wife. I smiled. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start a revolution. I found the cast iron skillet. It was dusty, shoved to the back of the bottom cabinet. Jessica hated cast iron. She said it was unhygienic because you couldn't put it in the dishwasher. To me, it was sacred. That skillet was seasoned with 40 years of family dinners. It held the flavor of every birthday, every Thanksgiving, every late-night session after a gig. I put the skillet on the stove and turned the heat up high. I found an onion, a bell pepper, and a few stalks of celery in the crisper drawer. The Holy Trinity. I chopped them with a rhythm that felt like a drum solo, my knife hitting the wooden cutting board with a steady percussive beat. Chop, chop, chop. Then I opened the spice cabinet. Jessica had reorganized it, of course. Everything was in matching glass jars with cursive labels. But she hadn't thrown away my old tin of Cajun seasoning. She probably didn't know what it was. I popped the lid and the smell hit me. Cayenne, paprika, garlic powder, thyme. It smelled like home. It smelled like Saturday nights with Ruby. I threw a stick of butter into the hot skillet. It sizzled loudly, an aggressive hiss that sounded like a challenge. I tossed in the vegetables.
Shh. Crack. The aroma exploded into the air. The sharp, biting scent of onions frying in butter mixed with the earthy green of the peppers. Then I added the sausage, slicing it thick. The fat rendered out mixing with the butter, creating a rich red gravy that bubbled and popped. I sprinkled in the Cajun seasoning heavily. The air grew thick with spice, the kind that tickles the back of your throat and makes your eyes water in the best possible way. It was the smell of life. It was the smell of a heart beating. And in Jessica's sterile beige mausoleum of a house, it was an act of terrorism. I heard the footsteps upstairs almost immediately. They weren't the slow, rhythmic steps of meditation. They were fast, urgent, pounding steps. I kept stirring, humming a low blues tune under my breath. I put a spell on you, because you're mine. The kitchen door flew open. Jessica stood there. She was wearing a white yoga outfit that looked pristine. Her eyes were wide and she was holding her nose with a look of absolute horror, as if I were boiling a skunk on the stove. "Elijah!" she shrieked. Her voice cracked, losing all of its cultivated calmness. "What in God's name are you doing?" I didn't turn around. I kept stirring the roux, letting the wooden spoon scrape against the iron. Making dinner. "Jessica, a man has to eat." "Stop it! Stop it right now!" she yelled, rushing over to the stove. She reached for the knob to turn off the burner, but I blocked her with my cane. I didn't hit her. I just placed the rubber tip of the cane firmly on the floor, creating a barrier between her and my gumbo. "Careful," I said, my voice low and gravelly. "That is hot grease. You don't want to splatter that on your white spandex." She recoiled, coughing as the spicy steam hit her face. "You are suffocating us. This smell, it is disgusting. It smells like dead animals and grease." "It smells like soul food, Jessica," I said, taking a deep breath of the spicy air. "It smells like history. Ruby used to make this every Friday. I thought it might help bring some good memories back into this house. The energy felt a little stagnant, don't you think?" "Memories?" she spat, waving her hand in front of her face. "You are ruining the air quality. I have clients coming over in an hour for a wellness consultation. How am I supposed to talk about purity and detoxification when my house smells like a cheap roadside diner?" I turned to look at her. I let my face drop into that confused mask again, but I kept my eyes sharp. "Cheap diner? This is andouille sausage. It is a delicacy. I just wanted to share. I thought maybe you and Dante—" "We are vegan, Elijah!" she screamed. "Vegan! We do not eat carcasses, and we certainly do not fry them in pure cholesterol." She ran to the window and threw it open. The cold Chicago air rushed in, battling the warmth of my cooking. She grabbed a can of air freshener, something that smelled like chemical lavender, and started spraying it wildly around the room. The mist mixed with the smoke, creating a nauseating combination. "You are doing this on purpose," she hissed, turning back to me. The can of air freshener was shaking in her hand. "You are trying to sabotage me." I looked at her innocently. "Sabotage? I am just cooking dinner, Jessica. Why are you so angry? Is it the cayenne? I can add a little sugar if it is too spicy for you." I saw the vein in her forehead pulse. She was close. She was very close to losing that carefully constructed persona of the benevolent caregiver. "Get out," she whispered. "I beg your pardon?" "Get out of my kitchen," she screamed, slamming the can down on the counter. "Take that filth back to your hole in the wall. You are contaminating everything." I turned off the stove. The sizzling died down, but the smell was already embedded in the curtains and the walls in her hair. I picked up the heavy skillet. My wrist hurt, but I didn't show it. I poured the contents into a ceramic bowl. "I am sorry, Jessica," I said softly, moving slowly toward the door. "I didn't realize my presence was such a pollutant. I will just go eat in my room, like a good dog." I walked past her. As I did, I stumbled slightly. It was a calculated move. I let my shoulder bump into the doorframe and I let out a small, pathetic groan of pain. She didn't help me. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just stood there glaring at me with hatred so pure it was almost impressive. "Just go," she growled, "and turn on the air purifier in the study. I don't want that smell seeping under the door." I limped down the hallway. I heard the front door open. Dante was home. I stopped in the shadows of the corridor, clutching my bowl of gumbo. I needed to hear this. Dante walked into the kitchen. I heard him sniff the air. "Wow," he said. Is that Mom's gumbo? It smells amazing." "Don't you dare,"
Jessica snapped. "Don't you dare say that smells good, Dante. Your father just gassed the entire first floor with his poison. It's just food." "Jess," Dante said, his voice weary. "He probably just got hungry." "It is not just food," Jessica yelled, and I heard the sound of glass shattering. She must have thrown a jar. "It is an act of aggression. He is defying me, Dante. He knows I have the yoga group coming. He is trying to humiliate me." "Jess, calm down." "No, I will not calm down. I am sick of this, Dante. I am sick of tiptoeing around him. I am sick of the smell of old man, and now this greasy poverty food. Poverty food." I felt my grip tighten on the bowl. That food had fed kings of jazz. That food had built this house. "We need to get him out, Dante," she continued, her voice dropping to a frantic hiss. "We need to speed up the timeline. Did he sign the papers?" "No," Dante said. "He spilled coffee on them." "It was an accident. Accident, my ass. He is playing us. I see the way he looks at me. He knows Dante. He knows we are broke. He knows about the loan sharks." "Shh," Dante hissed. "Keep your voice down. He might hear you." "Let him hear," Jessica screamed. "What is he going to do? He can't even walk without that stupid stick. He is a vegetable, Dante. A useless, rotting vegetable taking up space in my house." I reached into my pocket. My hand found the phone. It had been recording since I put the butter in the pan, but I needed more. I needed the kill shot. I needed her to claim ownership. I needed her to say the words that would bury her in court. I turned around. I walked back toward the kitchen. I made sure my cane tapped loudly on the floor. Click, click, click. They went silent as I appeared in the doorway. I looked at Dante. Then I looked at Jessica. I heard glass breaking. I said, my voice trembling just enough. "Is everyone okay?" Jessica stared at me. Her chest was heaving. Her face was flushed red. The mask was gone. The life coach was gone. There was only the greedy, desperate woman beneath. "Go back to your room, Elijah," she said through gritted teeth. "I just wanted to help," I said, taking a step forward. "I can clean up the glass. This is my house, after all. I don't want anyone to get cut." That did it. The trigger. My house. Jessica lunged forward. She didn't touch me, but she got right in my face. Her eyes were manic. "Your house?" she screamed, spraying spittle on my cheek. "You think this is your house? You signed the deed over to the trust, Elijah. And who controls the trust? Dante. And who controls Dante? Me, Jessica. Stop!" Dante shouted, grabbing her arm. "Don't touch me." She shook him off, turning back to me. "This is not your house anymore, old man. This is my house. Mine, my floors, my walls, my kitchen. You are just a guest here, a guest who has overstayed his welcome." She pointed a shaking finger at my face. "You are a pollutant, Elijah. You are a stain on this property." "I am trying to elevate this place. I am trying to make it worth something, and you are dragging it down into the gutter with your cheap food and your old stories." She took a breath, her eyes wild. "So listen to me carefully. You are going to go back to that room, and you are going to stay there until we find a facility that will take you. I don't care if it is a state-run hellhole. I don't care if it smells like urine and bleach, as long as you are out of here. This is my house. Do you hear me? Mine." The room went deadly silent. The echo of her scream hung in the air, mixing with the smell of the gumbo she hated so much. I looked at her. I looked at the hate in her eyes. And for the first time, I let a tiny sliver of the real Elijah peek through. "I hear you, Jessica," I said calmly. Loud and clear. I reached into my pocket and pressed the stop button on the recording app. The haptic feedback buzzed against my thigh, a little vibration of victory. I turned around and walked away. I heard Dante sobbing quietly in the kitchen. I didn't feel bad for him anymore. I walked back to my study. I sat down on the mattress and took a spoonful of the cold gumbo. It was spicy. It was rich. It tasted like freedom. I chewed slowly, savoring the texture of the sausage. "Enjoy the house, Jessica," I thought, "because you just evicted yourself." The following morning, the atmosphere in the house shifted from hostile to conspiratorial. There was a nervous energy in the air, like static electricity before a thunderstorm. I was sitting in my study staring at the water stain on the ceiling, which had begun to look like the shape of a gavel, when Dante knocked on the door. He didn't wait for an answer. He just pushed it open and stood there, rubbing his hands together. "Dad," he said, his voice pitched a little too high. We have a surprise for you. Come into the living room. There is someone very special we want you to meet. A surprise. In this house, a surprise usually meant something was being taken away from me. I grabbed my cane and followed him. My hip was stiff, the dampness of the air mattress seeping into my bones, but I walked with my head up. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me limp more than necessary. In the living room, sitting on one of the white sofas, was a woman I had never seen before. She was middle-aged, wearing a navy blue suit that had seen better days, and carrying a briefcase that looked heavy enough to hold a body. She had a tight smile plastered on her face, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. It was the smile of a bureaucrat who had met her quota for the month. Jessica was sitting next to her, leaning forward with an expression of intense engagement. When I entered, Jessica stood up and clapped her hands together softly. "Elijah," she cooed. "This is Ms. Carver. She is a senior lifestyle consultant. We asked her to come by and chat with you about some opportunities." Ms. Carver stood up and extended a hand. Her grip was cold and clammy. "Mr. Thorne," she said, "it is a pleasure. I have heard so much about you. Jessica tells me you are having a bit of a rough time with your recovery." I looked at her hand, then at her face. I didn't shake it. "Who do you work for?" "Ms. Carver," I asked, leaning on my cane. She pulled her hand back, slightly flustered. "Oh, I represent a network of premier care communities. We specialize in finding the perfect placement for seniors who need a little extra support. Specifically, we represent the Golden Horizon Group." Golden Horizon. The name sounded nice. It conjured images of sunsets and peaceful meadows. But I knew that name. I had seen it in the papers a few years back when a whistleblower exposed conditions at one of their facilities on the south side. Bed sores, malnutrition, oversedation. I sat down slowly in the armchair opposite them. "So you are here to sell me a timeshare?" I asked, playing the confused old man card just a little bit to see how they would react. Jessica laughed, a nervous tinkling sound. "Oh no, Elijah. Nothing like that. Ms. Carver is here to help us upgrade your living situation. We have been talking and, well, this house is just too dangerous for you. The stairs, the slippery floors. We found a place that is designed just for people like you, people like me." Ms. Carver opened her briefcase and pulled out a glossy brochure. It featured stock photos of happy, silver-haired people playing chess and laughing at salad. "This is Oakbridge Manor," she said, sliding the brochure across the coffee table. "It is a state-of-the-art facility. 24-hour nursing care, recreational activities. And best of all, it is fully secure, so you don't have to worry about wandering off." I looked at the brochure, then I looked at the small print on the back. A Medicaid-certified facility, state funding pending. This wasn't a luxury retirement home. This was a warehouse for the unwanted. I looked up at Dante. He was studying his shoes again. "Dante," I said softly, "you are putting me in a state home." "Dad, no," Dante stammered, looking up with panic in his eyes. It's not like that. It has great reviews." Jessica said. Jessica cut him off. "It is an assisted living community, Dante. Don't use such archaic terms. Elijah, look at the amenities. They have a music therapy room. You would love that. Music therapy. Probably a broken radio in a basement while a nurse hands out sedatives." I looked at Ms. Carver. She was watching me, assessing me. She was trying to figure out if I was pliable, if I was the kind of old man who would sign whatever was put in front of him just to make the nice lady stop talking. "Ms. Carver," I said, my voice dropping the tremble and becoming steady, "I have a few questions about Oakbridge Manor." "Of course," she said, smiling. "Ask away." "What is your staff-to-patient ratio on the night shift?" I asked. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Excuse me?" "The ratio," I repeated. "Is it 1 to 10, 1 to 15, or is it 1 to 30 like the state minimum allows for facilities that accept Medicaid waivers?" She blinked. "Well, it varies depending on the census, but we always adhere to state guidelines." "State guidelines?" I nodded. "That means 1 nurse for 30 patients. So if I fall in the middle of the night and press the call button, I can expect to wait 45 minutes for someone to find me. Is that correct?" Jessica stiffened. "Elijah, stop being difficult. Ms. Carver is trying to help." I ignored Jessica. "And what is your policy on chemical restraints, Ms. Carver?" "Chemical restraints," she repeated, looking genuinely confused now. "Yes. Antipsychotics administered to patients without a diagnosis of psychosis, simply to keep them docile. Seroquel, Haldol, I know Golden Horizon faced a class action lawsuit in 2019 regarding the overprescription of sedatives. Has that policy changed, or is it still standard operating procedure for residents who ask too many questions? Ms. Carver shifted in her seat. She looked at Jessica, then back at me. Mr. Thorne, I assure you our medical team is top-notch. We only administer medication as prescribed by a physician. A physician employed by you, I countered. And tell me, Ms. Carver, does your facility accept patients who have not been adjudicated, incapacitated by a court of law? Because as far as I know, I am a free citizen of the United States. I have not been declared incompetent. So unless I sign myself in voluntarily, you cannot take me. Jessica slammed her hand on the table. The sound made Ms. Carver jump. You are confused, Elijah, Jessica shouted. You are having an episode. Mrs. Carver, he has dementia. He forgets things. He leaves the stove on. He is a danger to himself. I turned my gaze to Jessica. My dementia seems to have cleared up remarkably well for this conversation, wouldn't you say? I looked back at Ms. Carver. She was closing her briefcase. She was a saleswoman, not a kidnapper. She came here expecting an easy commission, a signature from a tired son and a drooling father. She didn't sign up for a legal deposition in a living room. I don't think this is a good fit, she said, standing up quickly. Mr. Thorne clearly has some reservations, and without a power of attorney or a court order, we really cannot proceed with an intake. Ms. Carver, wait, Jessica pleaded, standing up and grabbing the woman's arm. We can get the order. We are working on it. Just hold the bed for us. Please, we can't keep him here. He is destroying our lives. Ms. Carver pulled her arm away gently but firmly. I am sorry, Mrs. Thorne. Call us when the paperwork is in order. Good day. She walked out the front door faster than she had walked in. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Dante sat with his head in his hands. Jessica stood in the middle of the room, vibrating with rage. She stared at the closed door, then slowly turned to face me. Her face was not the face of a life coach. It was the face of a cornered animal. You think you are so smart? She whispered. Her voice was low, shaking with suppressed violence. You think because you read a few legal thrillers you can outsmart me? I didn't say anything. I just watched her. You just made a very big mistake, Elijah, she said, walking toward me slowly. That was the nice way. That was the dignified way. You could have gone to a place with people, with activities. You could have lived out your days in peace. Peace, I asked. You call being drugged and neglected peace. I call it getting you out of my hair, she screamed. The veneer cracked completely now. I am done, Elijah. I am done with the smell of your cooking. I am done with your limping. I am done with you looking at me like I am the villain. I am trying to save this family. Save it from what I asked calmly. From solvency. From honesty. From you, she shrieked. You are a leech. You are sitting on millions of dollars of assets, this house, the royalties, and you hoard it. While Dante suffers, while we drown in debt, you owe us this. You owe us for taking care of you. I looked at Dante. He didn't look up. He was letting her speak for him. He was letting her say the things he was too cowardly to say. I owe you nothing, I said. I raised a son. I paid for his college. I paid off his debts. If he is drowning, it is because he refuses to learn how to swim. Jessica grabbed a vase from the side table, a cheap geometric thing she had bought to replace my antique lamp, and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the fireplace, exploding into 1,000 white shards. Fine, she hissed, breathing heavily. You want to play hardball. We will play hardball. You think you need a court order to be committed? Watch me. She leaned in close to my face. I could smell the coffee on her breath. I could see the dilated pupils of her eyes. I will make you crazy, Elijah. I will make you so crazy that the judge will beg me to lock you up. I will take away your food. I will take away your sleep. I will gaslight you until you don't know what day of the week it is. And then I will dump you in the darkest, deepest hole I can find, and I will never visit. She straightened up, smoothing her jacket as if she hadn't just threatened her father-in-law with psychological torture. Dante, get up, she barked. Dante stood up, wiping his eyes. We are going to the lawyer, she said. The real lawyer, not that old fossil Saul. We are going to file for emergency guardianship, and this time we are not asking. She grabbed her purse and marched to the door. Dante followed her like a beaten dog. Before she left, she turned back one last time. Enjoy the house, Elijah, she said.
It's the last day you will recognize it. When I get back, I am taking the door off your room. I want to see everything you do." The door slammed. I sat there in the silence, listening to the echo of the shattering vase. My hands were shaking now, not from the act, but from the reality of what had just happened. She had declared war, total war. I looked at the shards of the vase on the floor. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the phone. I hadn't recorded it. I couldn't risk her seeing it this close. But I didn't need a recording of this. I saw it in her eyes. She was desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. She said she was going to a lawyer. She said she was going to file for guardianship. That meant I had a timeline. I had maybe 24 hours before I was standing in front of a judge. I needed that notebook. I needed the piano. And I needed to make one more call. Not to Saul. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 20 years. The line rang 4 times. Then a gruff voice answered. "Yeah, Big Mike," I said. "It's Elijah Thorne. E.J." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "Well, I'll be damned. The ghost of Chicago jazz. I thought you were dead." "Not yet, Mike," I said, "but I need a favor. I need a truck, and I need a couple of guys who don't ask questions and look scary enough to make a storage unit owner wet his pants." I heard the sound of a lighter clicking on the other end. "For you, E.J., Mike said. "I'll bring the whole crew. When do we roll?" "Right now, Mike," I said, standing up and gripping my cane. "Right now." I hung up. I looked at the empty space where the piano used to be. "Hang on, Ruby," I whispered. "The band is getting back together." I waited until the sound of Jessica's SUV faded completely into the distance before I made my move. The house was silent, but it felt like the silence of a held breath waiting for the scream. She had taken the door off my room just like she threatened, leaving me exposed to the hallway, but she had made a critical error. She assumed that without a door I was trapped. She forgot that a man who spent 40 years touring with jazz bands knows how to move without making a sound, even with a bad hip. I grabbed my cane and the trench coat where I had hidden my checkbook. I did not call a taxi. Taxis leave records. Taxis have apps that Dante might have linked to my email. I called Big Mike. 5 minutes later, a black sedan with tinted windows rolled silently to the curb. It was not a luxury car. It was a heavy, reinforced vehicle, the kind that carries people who do not want to be bothered. Getting from the front door to the car was a journey of 1,000 miles. Every step sent a jolt of electricity from my hip to my teeth. The wind was whipping off Lake Michigan, cutting through my coat, but I welcomed it. It felt real. It felt like Chicago. It bit my skin and reminded me that I was still flesh and blood, not just a problem to be managed. The driver was a man I knew only as tiny, despite being the size of a vending machine. He opened the door for me with a nod of respect. No questions, no small talk. Just a smooth ride to the destination I had given him. We pulled up to Silverman's Deli on Roosevelt Road. It was a relic, a place that smelled of pickle brine, corned beef, and 80 years of gossip. It was the only place in the city where Saul Berkowitz would eat lunch. I limped inside. The noise hit me first. The clatter of heavy ceramic plates, the shouting of orders, the hum of a dozen conversations. It was a symphony of life. I saw Saul sitting in a booth in the back wearing a suit that looked like he had slept in it since 1985. He was attacking a bowl of matzo ball soup with the same ferocity he used to attack prosecutors in the courtroom. I slid into the booth opposite him. The vinyl squeaked under my weight. My hip throbbed, a dull, heavy rhythm, but I ignored it. "Elijah," Saul said without looking up from his soup. "You look terrible. You look like you went 12 rounds with a heavyweight and lost by decision." "I feel worse than I look, Saul," I said, signaling the waitress for coffee. "Tell me you have something for me. Tell me we can stop them." Saul put down his spoon. He wiped his mouth with a paper napkin and then reached into his battered leather briefcase. He pulled out a thick file folder and placed it on the table between us. He placed his hand on top of it as if he were trying to keep the contents from exploding. "Elijah," he said, and his voice was unusually soft. "I have been your lawyer for 40 years. I have handled your contracts, your copyright suits, your estate planning. I have seen you deal with thieves, liars, and corrupt record executives. Get to the point, Saul." "The point is," Saul said, looking me dead in the eye, "this is the worst mess I have ever seen, and it is not just greed, Elijah, it is desperation." He opened the file. "I ran a full forensic audit on Dante's finances like you asked. I called in a favor at the bank. Elijah Dante is not just broke, He is underwater. He is drowning in the middle of the ocean with an anvil tied to his ankle. I looked at the numbers on the page. They were staggering. Negative balances. Maxed out credit lines. He leveraged everything, Saul continued. But that is not the worst part. 6 months ago, right around the time you went in for your first consultation about the hip surgery, a new loan appeared on the title of your house. I froze. The coffee cup stopped halfway to my mouth. My house is paid off, Saul. I paid the mortgage off in '92. Not anymore, Saul said. He slid a document toward me. It was a home equity line of credit, a second mortgage, for $300,000, and at the bottom of the page was a signature, Elijah J. Thorne, J. It was a good forgery. It had my loop on the J and the sharp slant on the T, but it wasn't mine. He forged my name, I whispered. My own son forged my name. He did, Saul confirmed. And that is a felony, Elijah. Fraud, forgery, identity theft. If we take this to the police, Dante goes to prison for 5 to 10 years. No probation, no plea deal. This is big boy crime. I stared at the signature. I felt a cracking sensation in my chest. Not a heart attack, but something deeper. The breaking of the last illusion I had about my boy. Where did the money go, Saul? I asked. $300,000. Did he buy a car? Did he buy jewelry for Jessica? I wish he had, Saul said, shaking his head. At least then we could repossess the assets. No, Elijah. He put it all into a proprietary cryptocurrency exchange. Some platform that promised 1,000% returns. It was a Ponzi scheme, Elijah. The whole market crashed 2 months ago. The money is gone. Vaporized. I closed my eyes. He gambled my house on internet magic money. But wait, Saul said, leaning in. It gets worse. When the crypto crashed, he didn't stop. He tried to win it back. He borrowed money from private lenders. Private lenders, I asked, opening my eyes. Loan sharks, Elijah. The kind who don't report to credit bureaus. The kind who operate out of the back of pool halls in Cicero. I found a lien placed on the property by a shell company linked to the Volkov organization. Russian mob. My son had borrowed money from the Russian mob using my house as collateral. That explains the rush, I said, realizing the full picture. That explains why Jessica is so frantic. It is not just about the $2 million for a condo in Florida. They need to pay these guys back before they start breaking legs. Exactly, Saul said. They are terrified, Elijah. They are not just kicking you out because you are a burden. They are kicking you out because they need to liquidate the asset immediately to save their own skins. If they don't sell that house in 30 days, they are dead meat. I sat back in the booth. The noise of the diner faded away. I was alone in a cold, dark place. My son was a criminal. He was a thief. And he was a fool who had endangered everything I worked for. So what do we do? Saul asked. Do I call the district attorney? I can have the police at your house in an hour. We arrest Dante for fraud. We arrest Jessica as an accomplice. The bank voids the mortgage because it was forged. You keep the house. I looked at Saul. I looked at the pickle on his plate. I looked at the waitress pouring coffee for a trucker in the corner. If I send him to prison, I said slowly, I lose him forever. He is already lost. Elijah, Saul said gently, he stole your house. No, I said, he stole my trust. That is different. If I send him to prison, he becomes a victim in his own mind. He will blame me. He will say I was the cruel father who locked him up. He will never learn. He will just rot. Then what? Saul asked, throwing his hands up. You want to pay it off. You want to write another check. Elijah, you can't. You don't have 300 grand liquid. And even if you did, you would just be enabling him again. I am not going to pay it, I said. And I am not going to call the police. Not yet. Then what are you going to do? I am going to let him grow up, I said. I took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter and hot. Saul listened to me. Dante has never faced a consequence in his life. When he failed math, I hired a tutor. When he crashed his car, I bought him a new one. When he got into debt, I paid it off. I built a cushion around him so soft he never felt the ground. I leaned forward across the table. I am going to remove the cushion, Saul. I am going to let him hit the concrete. How? Saul asked. The loan sharks, I said. They want their money. They want the house, Saul corrected. They want value, I said. They don't care about Victorian architecture. They care about dollars. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the folded paper I had taken from the trash. The wet page with the notary stamp. Dante forged my signature to get the loan, I said. That means the loan is invalid. But the debt is real. The debt belongs to him. I need you to contact the shell company, Saul. Are you crazy? Saul hissed. You want me to call the mob? I want you to call the lenders, I said, correcting him. Tell them that Mr. Thorne, the senior Mr. Thorne, is aware of the situation. Tell them that the house is not for sale and that the title is locked up in a trust they cannot touch. Tell them that if they try to foreclose based on a forged document, I will bring the FBI down on their entire operation so fast their heads will spin. And then what Saul asked. They will kill Dante. No, they won't, I said. Dead men don't pay. Tell them that Dante has an asset. Tell them about the piano. The piano? Saul asked, confused. The one in the storage unit. The piano contains the notebook, I said. And the notebook contains the rights to the songs. Tell them that if they want their money, they need to help me recover that piano. Tell them that the true value of the estate is not in the real estate, but in the intellectual property that Dante stole and sold for $4,000. You want the mob to get the piano back for you? Saul asked, his mouth hanging open. I want the mob to realize that Dante is incompetent, I said. I want them to realize that I am the one who can make them whole. I want to shift the debt, Saul. I want to make a deal. I will pay off Dante's debt using the proceeds from the songs, but in exchange, I want two things. What two things? First, I get the house back free and clear. Second, they scare the living hell out of him. I want him to look into the abyss, Saul. I want him to think it is over. And then I want him to see that it was his old man who pulled him back from the edge. Saul stared at me for a long time. Then he started to laugh. A dry, wheezing laugh. You are a dangerous man, Elijah Thorne, he said. You are playing 4D chess with gangsters. It is just jazz, Saul, I said, signaling for the check. Improvise, adapt, overcome. I stood up wincing as the pain shot through my hip. One more thing, Saul. Yeah, get that emergency injunction anyway. Not for the house. For me. I need to block that guardianship hearing. Jessica is going to try to commit me tomorrow. I need to walk into that courtroom not as a defendant, but as a plaintiff. I have already drafted it. Saul grinned. It will be on the judge's desk in an hour. Good. I buttoned my coat. Where are you going now? Saul asked. Back to the house. It is dangerous, Elijah. I have to go back, I said. If I don't return, they will call the police and say I wandered off. I need to be there when the storm hits. I need to be in the center of the room when the walls come down. I walked out of the diner. The wind was still blowing, but it didn't feel cold anymore. It felt like the wind of change. Dante wanted to be the man of the house. He wanted to make big deals. He wanted to play in the major leagues. Well, son, I thought as I climbed back into Big Mike's car, welcome to the show. The raid on the storage unit had been a bust. A glorious, adrenaline-fueled bust. Big Mike and his crew had terrified the owner of the facility into opening the gate, but when we rolled up the metal door of Unit 4B, it was empty. The dusty concrete floor held only the rectangular outline of where my life had sat just hours before. The flipper, Miller, had sold it. He had panicked when Saul's investigator called, and instead of stripping it, he offloaded it to the first person who showed up with cash and a truck. For 3 hours, I thought I had lost her forever. I sat in the back of Big Mike's sedan, staring at the gray Chicago skyline, feeling a grief deeper than the surgery scars on my hip. I had failed. Dante had won. The legacy was gone, scattered into the wind like ash. Then, my phone buzzed. It was Saul. We found it, he said, his voice breathless. Miller didn't sell it to a dealer. He sold it to a kid. A music student from the conservatory. The kid rented a U-Haul and drove it away at noon. Address, I demanded, my hand gripping the phone so tight I thought the screen would crack. It's a basement apartment in Rogers Park, Saul said. 1402 West Pratt Boulevard. Elijah, the kid listed it on a student forum just now. He's not selling it. He's asking for advice on how to tune it. We drove north. The city blurred past the window, the gentrified condos, the crumbling brick two-flats, the L-tracks running like steel veins above the street. Rogers Park was far. It was the end of the line, a place where students and immigrants and artists lived because it was the last affordable zip code on the lakefront. When we pulled up to the address, it was a tired-looking red brick building with peeling paint and ivy crawling up the sides like veins. I told Big Mike to wait.
This wasn't a job for muscle. This was a job for a musician. I limped down the concrete stairs to the garden unit. The air smelled of damp earth and laundry detergent. I stood in front of a door that had once been painted green, but was now chipped to reveal the gray wood beneath. I raised my hand to knock, but then I froze. From inside the apartment, I heard a sound. It was a piano. My piano. But it wasn't just the tone, that rich, dark, woody timbre that only a 60-year-old Steinway possesses. It was the melody. Whoever was inside was playing Ruby's Lament. It was a B-side track from her second album, a song she wrote when we lost our first baby, years before Dante was born. It was a song full of dissonant chords and unresolved tension, a song that required a touch as light as a feather but as heavy as a stone. And this kid, this stranger, he was playing it right. I stood there in the dank hallway, leaning on my cane, tears streaming down my face. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I wasn't an old man being hunted by his family. I was 30 years old again, standing in the control booth, watching Ruby pour her pain into the microphone. I knocked. The music stopped abruptly. A moment later, the door opened. A young man stood there. He couldn't have been more than 20. He was skinny, wearing a faded hoodie and sweatpants with hair that hadn't seen a comb in days. He looked tired. He looked hungry. But his eyes were bright and alert. "Yes?" he asked, looking at my cane and my trench coat. "I need to see the piano," I said. My voice was thick with emotion. The boy's eyes widened. He stepped back, instinctively blocking the view. Are you from the shop?" The guy I bought it from said no returns. "I am not from the shop, son," I said, stepping into the light so he could see my face. "I am the man who tuned that piano every month for 40 years. He stared at me. Then he looked at the cane, then back at my face. "Wait," he whispered. You look like the guy in the picture." "What picture?" "Inside the bench," he said. There was an old photo tucked in the sheet music, a man and a woman. I felt my heart stop. Ruby and me. "May I come in?" I asked. He hesitated, then stepped aside. "Come in." It's a mess. I'm sorry." I walked into the apartment. It was basically one room, a mattress on the floor in the corner, a hot plate on a stack of books, ramen noodle cups stacked like a pyramid on a wobbly table. And there, taking up almost half the living space, was the Steinway. It looked huge in the small room. It looked like a king in a peasant's hovel. But it was polished. He had wiped away the dust. He had cleared the space around it with a reverence that Dante had never shown. I walked over to it. I ran my hand along the curve of the lid. It was cold to the touch, but it felt alive. "You play beautifully," I said softly. "Ruby's Lament." Not many people know that voicing in the bridge. The boy blushed. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Thanks. I found the sheet music in the bench too. It's incredible stuff. Complex. The harmonies they are like nothing I've ever seen." I sat down on the bench. It groaned familiarly under my weight. "What is your name, son?" "Andre," he said. "Andre Williams. I'm a sophomore at the conservatory. Jazz piano performance." "Andre," I said, "how much did you pay for this?" He looked down at his sneakers. $2,000. It was every cent I had. My financial aid check just cleared, and I know I should have used it for rent, but I saw the ad. A Steinway B for $2,000? I couldn't let it go to a scrapyard. The guy said if I didn't take it, he was going to saw the legs off. I looked at this boy. He was broke. He was living on noodles. And he had spent his survival money to save my wife's soul because he couldn't bear the thought of the music dying. He was more of a son to me in 5 minutes than Dante had been in 30 years. "Andre," I said, "did you find anything else?" He nodded slowly. He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a small black leather notebook. The cover was cracked and worn. "I found this taped under the soundboard," he said. "I haven't read it. I opened it and I saw it was handwritten music. It looked private, like a diary." He handed it to me. I held it in my hands. The leather felt warm. I opened it to the first page. Ruby's handwriting. The ink was faded, but the notes were clear. "Song for Elijah, Draft 1.
I let out a sob that shook my entire body. It was guttural and raw. The dam finally broke. All the stress, the betrayal, the anger, it all poured out in that one moment of relief. Andre didn't say anything. He just went to his little kitchenette and brought me a glass of water. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. I looked at the notebook. The millions of dollars in intellectual property were safe. But looking at Andre, I realized that money wasn't the only value here. "Andre," I said, closing the notebook, "do you know who owned this piano?" "No, sir," the seller didn't say. "It belonged to Ruby Thorne," I said. Andre's jaw dropped. "The Ruby Thorne? The Queen of the South Side?" I nodded. "And I am Elijah Thorne. I produced those records." He looked like he was about to faint. He grabbed the edge of the piano for support. "Oh my God. I am so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't mean to steal it. You didn't steal it, Andre," I said, cutting him off. "You saved it. You are the guardian angel of this instrument." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my checkbook, the one with the $4,000. But I wasn't just going to pay him back. I needed to make this right. "Andre, I want to buy the piano back." He nodded vigorously. "Of course. Take it. It's yours. You don't have to pay me. I mean, just give me back the $2,000 I paid the guy so I can pay rent, and it's yours." "No," I said. "That's not how business works, Andre. You made a smart investment. You identified an undervalued asset and you secured it. You deserve a return." I wrote a check. I made it out for $8,000. I tore it out and handed it to him. "8,000?" he squeaked, his voice cracking. "Mr. Thorne, I can't take this. This is tuition for a whole semester." "Take it," I said sternly. "But there is a condition." He froze. "Anything." "The condition is that you keep the piano here for a few days," I said. "I have some house cleaning to do. My home is not currently safe for an instrument of this caliber. Can I trust you to watch over it?" "Yes, sir. Absolutely. I won't let anyone touch it." "And one more thing," I said, standing up. I looked around his tiny, damp apartment. I looked at the ramen noodles. I looked at the passion in his eyes. "I am establishing a scholarship in my wife's name," I said. "The Ruby Thorne Fellowship for Young Jazz Musicians. It covers full tuition, room, and board for 4 years. Andre stared at me. "I think I just found my first recipient," I said. He started to cry. He didn't try to hide it. He just covered his face with his hands and wept. "Thank you," he sobbed. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. "Thank the music. You respected the music, son, and the music always pays you back." I walked to the door. I turned back one last time. "Andre?" "Yes, Mr. Thorne?" "Practice that bridge in Ruby's Lament," I said. "You're rushing the tempo just a hair. Lay back on the beat. Let it breathe." He smiled through his tears. "Yes, sir. I will." I walked back up the stairs to the street. The wind was still cold, but I felt a fire burning in my chest. I had the notebook tucked safely in my inside pocket, right against my heart. I had the piano secured, and I had reminded myself that there were still good people in this world. I climbed back into Big Mike's car. "You get it, boss?" Mike asked, looking in the rearview mirror. "I got it, Mike," I said, patting my chest. "Where to now?" I looked out the window. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the city. It was time. The pieces were in place. The trap was set. "Take me home, Mike," I said. "I have a court date to prepare for, and I need to pick out a suit." The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old lies. I sat at the defendant's table next to Saul wearing my best charcoal suit. It was the suit I had worn to accept my Lifetime Achievement Award from the Chicago Jazz Institute 5 years ago. I chose it carefully. Jessica wanted to paint me as a senile old man in pajamas. I intended to show the judge a man who commanded respect before she was even born. Across the aisle, Jessica sat with her lawyer, a slick young man with too much gel in his hair and a suit that cost more than my first car. Jessica was dressed in a modest beige cardigan and a skirt that went below her knees. She wore no jewelry. Her makeup was done to make her look pale and exhausted. She looked like a saint who had been pushed to the brink of martyrdom. Dante sat next to her. He was wearing a suit that was slightly too big for him, as if he had shrunk inside it. He was staring at the table, hands clasped so tight his knuckles were white. He looked like a man waiting for the executioner to pull the lever. The bailiff called the court to order. The Honorable Judge Sharon Moore entered.
She was a stern black woman in her 60s with eyes that had seen every variation of family tragedy the city had to offer. She didn't look at the lawyers. She looked at the people. She looked at Jessica. She looked at Dante. And then she looked at me. I held her gaze. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just nodded once, a respectful acknowledgement of her authority. She paused for a fraction of a second, then sat down. "We are here to hear the petition for emergency guardianship regarding Mr. Elijah Thorne," Judge Moore said, her voice cutting through the silence. "The petitioners allege that Mr. Thorne is suffering from advanced dementia and poses an immediate danger to himself and others. Mr. Thorne's counsel has filed an objection." "Let's proceed." Jessica's lawyer stood up. He buttoned his jacket with a flourish that irritated me instantly. "Your Honor," he began, his voice smooth as oil, "we take no pleasure in being here today. This is a tragedy, a family tragedy. My clients, Mr. and Mrs. Thorne, have done everything in their power to care for their father. They have renovated their home to accommodate him. They have hired consultants. They have sacrificed their time, their privacy, and their savings. But there comes a point where love is not enough. There comes a point where safety must take precedence." He gestured toward me as if I were a ticking bomb. "Mr. Thorne's condition has deteriorated rapidly since his hip surgery. The trauma of the operation, coupled with his advanced age, has accelerated cognitive decline. We have witnessed paranoia, aggression, and dangerous behavior that threatens the safety of the entire household. We are asking the court to grant temporary guardianship to his son, Dante Thorne, so that Mr. Thorne can be placed in a secure facility where he can receive the 24-hour care he desperately needs." Judge Moore looked over her glasses. "Call your first witness." Jessica took the stand. She walked slowly, clutching a tissue in her hand. She sat down and looked at the judge with wide, tear-filled eyes. "Mrs. Thorne," the lawyer asked softly, "can you describe the incidents that led you to file this petition?" Jessica sniffed. She dabbed at her dry eyes. "It started small," she said, her voice trembling just enough to be convincing. "Forgetting names, getting confused about what year it was. But then it got dangerous." She looked at me for a fleeting second, then looked away as if the sight of me was too painful. 3 days ago," she continued, "I came home to find the kitchen filled with smoke, thick black smoke. Elijah had turned the stove on high, and he was just standing there. He was burning things in a skillet. It wasn't food, Your Honor, it was sludge. It smelled like burning rubber and garbage. He was just staring at the flames, humming to himself. If I hadn't come home when I did, the whole house would have burned down. I sat there stone-faced. She took my gumbo, my act of culinary resistance, and turned it into arson. It was a brilliant lie because it was built on a grain of truth." "And was that the only incident?" the lawyer asked. "No," Jessica sobbed. Yesterday he disappeared. He locked himself in his room for hours, and then he just vanished. We searched the neighborhood. We were terrified. He can barely walk, Your Honor, but he managed to get out. He was wandering the streets of Chicago alone, confused. We didn't know if he had been hit by a car or mugged. When he finally came back, he was incoherent. He was talking about saving pianos and meeting people who didn't exist. He was hallucinating." She broke down, crying into her hands. "It is so hard, Your Honor. We try so hard to keep him safe, but we can't watch him every second. We are terrified that next time he walks out that door, he won't come back." Judge Moore watched her carefully. "Thank you, Mrs. Thorne." Then it was Saul's turn. Saul didn't stand up immediately. He arranged his papers slowly, deliberately, letting the silence stretch out until everyone was uncomfortable. Then he stood up. He didn't walk to the podium. He stayed at the table, leaning on it casually. "Mrs. Thorne," Saul said, his voice raspy, "you say my client burned food in the kitchen. Did you call the fire department?" "No," Jessica said, wiping her eyes. "I handled it myself. I didn't want to embarrass him." "How noble," Saul grunted. "And this wandering incident, you say he was missing for hours. Did you call the police? Did you file a missing persons report?" We were about to," Jessica stammered. "But then he came back." "So no police report," Saul said. "No fire report. Just your word." "My word is the truth." Jessica snapped, her sorrow instantly replaced by defensiveness. "Why would I lie? I love him. I am trying to save him." Saul didn't answer. He just looked at her for a long moment, then sat down. No further questions. Jessica stepped down. She looked at Dante and gave him a subtle nod. A cue. The lawyer called Dante Thorne. Dante walked to the stand. He looked like a man walking into a burning building. He sat down and the chair squeaked loudly in the quiet room. He wouldn't look at me. He looked at the flag in the corner. He looked at the stenographer. He looked everywhere except at the father who had raised him. "Mr. Thorne," the lawyer asked, "you are Elijah's only son, is that correct?" "Yes," Dante whispered. "Speak up, please," the judge said. "Yes," Dante said louder, his voice cracking. "And you love your father?" "Yes, more than anything. Tell the court about his condition. Do you agree with your wife's assessment?" Dante swallowed hard. I saw his Adam's apple bob up and down. I saw the sweat beading on his forehead. This was it. This was the moment of truth. He could stop this. He could tell the judge that I was fine, that his wife was a liar, that they were in debt to loan sharks. He could save his soul. I leaned forward slightly, willing him to look at me. "Look at me, son. Just look at me." But he didn't. My dad. He started, his voice shaking. He isn't the same man he used to be. The surgery, it took a lot out of him. He gets confused. He gets angry.
"Has he been violent?" the lawyer pressed.
Dante closed his eyes. I have felt threatened. Yes. He yells, he throws things, he talks to people who aren't there. He thinks he is still a big-shot producer in the 70s. He lives in the past. My heart went cold. It wasn't a sharp pain. It was a dull, numbing freeze. He was doing it. He was selling me out. Not for 30 pieces of silver, but for a reprieve from his wife's anger and his own financial failures. And do you believe he needs to be in a secure facility? Dante took a deep breath. He finally looked up, but not at me. He looked at the judge. "Yes, Your Honor," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I can't take care of him anymore. He is too much for us. It breaks my heart, but he needs to be put away, for his own good. He is gone. The father I knew is gone." The room was silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Judge Moore looked at Dante with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was it pity? Was it skepticism? "Thank you, Mr. Thorne," she said quietly. "You may step down." Dante practically ran back to his seat. He buried his face in his hands. Jessica put an arm around him, patting his back, acting the supportive wife, while she no doubt calculated how soon she could list the house on Zillow. The opposing lawyer stood up, looking smug. "Your Honor, the testimony is clear. We have a consistent pattern of dangerous behavior confirmed by the two people closest to the respondent. We ask that you grant the emergency petition immediately." Judge Moore turned to Saul. "Mr. Berkowitz, does your client wish to speak?" Saul smiled, a slow, predatory smile that showed off his yellowed teeth. "Oh yes, Your Honor," Saul said, standing up. "My client wishes to speak, but not with words." Saul picked up a small remote control from the table. "We would like to present a few exhibits, Your Honor. Exhibit A is a video recording taken from a camera installed in my client's bedroom. Exhibit B is an audio recording taken yesterday in the kitchen. And Exhibit C is a financial report that I think you will find very illuminating regarding the petitioner's motivation." Jessica's head snapped up. Her eyes went wide. She looked at the remote in Saul's hand as if it were a grenade. Dante stopped crying. He looked at me, and this time I looked back. I didn't look at him with anger. I looked at him with the cold disappointment of a man who realizes he raised a stranger. "You said I was living in the past, Dante," I thought as Saul pointed the remote at the large screen on the wall. "Well, let me show you what the past looks like. It looks like the truth." I leaned back in my chair and crossed my legs. The show was about to start, and unlike Dante's lies, this performance had perfect pitch. Saul pressed the button on the small black remote. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the hum of the hard drive spinning up on the projector. I watched Jessica. She was still holding Dante's hand, looking at the judge with that practiced expression of long-suffering martyrdom. She had no idea that the ground beneath her feet was about to turn into quicksand. The audio started first. It wasn't the polished sound of a studio recording. It was raw. It was the sound of a phone hidden in a pajama pocket, muffled by flannel but unmistakably clear. The voice that filled the courtroom was Jessica's. It was the voice from the party, the voice she used when she thought I was asleep in my wheelchair. "I give him 6 months, maybe less if we keep him comfortable downstairs. Once he is gone, we sell the place, take the cash, and move to a condo in Florida. No more stairs, no more old man smell, just $2 million in freedom." The recording stopped.
The silence that followed was heavy. It was the kind of silence that happens after a car crash. Jessica's lawyer froze. His pen hovered over his notepad. He looked at the speaker, then at his client, his face draining of color. He realized in that split second that he had been hired to facilitate a robbery, not a guardianship. Jessica let go of Dante's hand. She sat up straighter, her eyes darting around the room. "That was taken out of context," she blurted out, her voice shrill. I was just venting. It was a joke. A dark joke. Everyone makes dark jokes when they are stressed." Saul didn't even look at her. He just pressed the button again. The screen on the wall flickered to life. It was black and white footage, grainy but high definition enough to see the details. It was the view from the camera I had hidden in the smoke detector of my study. The timestamp in the corner read 3 days ago. On the screen, I was lying on the air mattress, asleep. Jessica walked into the frame. She was holding the paper cup with my heart medication and blood thinners. "The pills, doctor," Evans had told me, were crucial to prevent a post-surgical clot. In the video, Jessica didn't wake me up. She didn't put the cup on the table. She walked over to the trash can in the corner. She looked at the door to make sure no one was watching. Then, with a casual flick of her wrist, she dumped the pills into the garbage. She threw the empty cup on top of them. Then she walked over to the air mattress. She looked down at my sleeping form. She didn't fix the blanket. She didn't check my breathing. She nudged my bad hip with her foot, not hard enough to wake me, but hard enough to show contempt. Then she walked out. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. I saw the court reporter stop typing, her mouth hanging open. Jessica's lawyer closed his folder. He physically moved his chair a few inches away from her. But Saul wasn't done. He clicked the remote one more time. The video changed. It was the kitchen scene from the morning after the party. The camera angle was from the motion sensor I had installed above the refrigerator years ago to catch Dante stealing snacks when he was a teenager. The video showed Dante pushing the papers toward me. It showed my hand shaking. It showed the coffee spill. But then came the audio. Saul had synced the audio from my phone recording with the video feed. "You did that on purpose, you stupid old man." On the screen, Jessica's face twisted into that demonic mask of rage. She slammed the wet papers into the sink. "I will make you crazy, Elijah. I will make you so crazy that the judge will beg me to lock you up. I will take away your food. I will take away your sleep. I will gaslight you until you don't know what day of the week it is." Saul hit the pause button. The image of Jessica's snarling face remained frozen on the giant screen, looming over the courtroom like a gargoyle. Saul turned to the judge. He didn't shout. He didn't pound the table. He spoke with the quiet intensity of a man closing the final arguments of a murder trial. "Your Honor," Saul said, "the petitioners claim my client is incapacitated. They claim he is a danger to himself. The evidence suggests that the only danger Elijah Thorne faces is the people sitting at that table. They are not caregivers, they are conspirators. They have systematically deprived him of medical care, isolated him from his legal counsel, and attempted to coerce him into signing away his assets under duress. This is not guardianship, this is elder abuse, pure and simple." Judge Moore was staring at the screen. She had taken off her glasses. Her hands were clenched together on top of her desk. She didn't look at Saul, she was looking directly at Jessica. The judge's face was unreadable, but the air around her seemed to vibrate with tension. She slowly turned her gaze to Jessica's lawyer. "Counselor," Judge Moore said, her voice dangerously low. "Do you have any context for this? Do you have a dark joke explanation for throwing away prescribed heart medication?" The lawyer stood up. He looked like he wanted to vomit. "Your Honor, I was not aware of this footage. I was not aware of these actions. I would like to request a recess to consult with my clients." "Denied," Judge Moore snapped. The gavel banged down like a thunderclap. "We are done with recesses. We are done with petitions." She turned to Jessica. Jessica was trembling now. The act was gone. She looked small and vicious, like a rat trapped in a corner. "Mrs. Thorne," Judge Moore said, "in my 20 years on the bench, I have seen greed. I have seen neglect. But rarely have I seen such calculated, cold-blooded malice presented as benevolence. You came into my courtroom, swore an oath, and lied to my face. You painted a picture of a senile, helpless burden." The judge picked up a file from her desk. She opened it. "You called him a vegetable?" Judge Moore continued, her voice rising. "You said he has no value. You said he is living in the past." She looked at me.
For the first time, her expression softened. "Mr. Thorne," she said, "I grew up on the South Side. My father was a mechanic, but on Sundays, the only thing playing in our house was the Chicago Sound. I own every record you ever produced. I have an original pressing of Ruby's Lament framed in my chambers." Dante's head snapped up. Jessica's jaw dropped. "You are not a vegetable, sir," Judge Moore said with a fierce pride. "You are a cultural institution. You are a man who helped shape the sound of this city. And to see you treated like luggage to be discarded. It is personally offensive to this court." She turned back to Jessica and Dante. Her eyes were hard as diamonds. "The petition for emergency guardianship is denied with prejudice," she declared. "That means you cannot file it again, ever." "But I am not stopping there," she continued. "Based on the evidence of medical neglect and psychological abuse presented in Exhibit B and Exhibit C, I am sua sponte, that means on my own authority, issuing an emergency temporary restraining order against both Jessica Thorne and Dante Thorne." "What?" Jessica screamed, standing up. "You can't do that! It's my house! Sit down!" the bailiff barked, stepping forward. "It is not your house," Judge Moore said, her voice cutting through Jessica's scream. "As of this moment, you are ordered to vacate the premises at 4500 Greenwood Avenue immediately. You are to stay 500 feet away from Mr. Elijah Thorne. You are to have no contact with him, direct or indirect." "But where will we go?" Jessica cried, looking at Dante. "We have nowhere to go." "That, Mrs. Thorne, is not my concern," Judge Moore said coldly. "Perhaps you can find a facility that meets your standards for minimalism." The judge turned to the court officer. "Officer, please escort Mr. Thorne back to his residence to ensure his safety. I want a police detail stationed at the house while the respondents remove their personal effects. They are to take nothing but their clothes, no furniture, no electronics, and certainly no pianos." She looked at Dante. "Mr. Thorne," she said to my son, "you sat there and let this happen. You let your wife throw away your father's medicine. You are just as guilty as she is. I am referring this evidence to the district attorney's office for review regarding potential criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and elder abuse." Dante slumped forward, hitting his head on the table. A low moan escaped his lips. Judge Moore looked at me one last time. "Mr. Thorne," she said, "I apologize that your family failed you, but the law will not. You are free to go home." She banged the gavel. "All rise." I stood up. My hip hurt, but I felt 10 feet tall. Jessica was screaming at her lawyer. Dante was sobbing. The bailiff was moving toward them with handcuffs, not for arrest yet, but to control the outburst. I looked at Saul. He was smiling, putting the remote back in his pocket. "Not bad for an old fossil, huh?" Saul said. I put my hand on his shoulder. "You played it perfect, Saul. Right in the pocket." I turned to walk out of the courtroom. As I passed the table where Dante and Jessica were being corralled by the officers, I stopped. Jessica looked at me. Her mascara was running. Her hair was messy. She looked broken. "You planned this," she hissed. "You evil old man. You planned this whole thing." I leaned in close, so only she could hear. "I didn't plan it, Jessica," I whispered. "I just produced it. You provided all the material. I just hit the record button." I looked at Dante. He looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen. "Dad," he whispered. I didn't answer him. I couldn't. Not yet. I turned my back on them and walked down the center aisle of the courtroom. The sound of my cane tapping on the floor echoed in the silence. It was a steady, rhythmic beat. Tap, tap, tap. It sounded like the intro to a brand new song, a song about freedom. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors and walked out into the hallway. Big Mike was waiting for me. "Ready to go home, boss?" he asked. I smiled. "Yeah, Mike," I said. "Take me to the house. I need to make some space for a piano." The police cruiser was parked in the driveway, its lights flashing silently against the brick facade of my home. It was a sight that would have shamed me 40 years ago. In my neighborhood, having the police at your door meant trouble. It meant someone had slipped up. It meant the system was coming to take something away. But today those flashing lights looked like a shield. They were the barrier between my sanity and the chaos my family had unleashed. Big Mike pulled the sedan up to the curb. He turned off the engine and looked at me in the rearview mirror. "You want me to come in, boss?" he asked. His voice was low, rumbling like a bass guitar. "No, Mike?"
I said, adjusting my coat. This part I have to do alone. The judge gave me the law. Now I have to give them the truth. I walked up the path to the front door. The smart lock was still there, that black plastic eye staring at me. I didn't punch in the code. I used the heavy brass knocker, the one Ruby had bought in New Orleans. I knocked 3 times. Hard. The door opened. It wasn't Dante. It wasn't Jessica. It was a young police officer with a crew cut. "Mr. Thorne," he asked politely. "The judge just called us. We are supervising the eviction. They are in the living room. They are having a hard time accepting the situation." I thanked him and stepped inside. The house was in disarray. Suitcases were open on the floor. Clothes were scattered everywhere like the aftermath of a tornado. Jessica was throwing designer shoes into a duffel bag, her movements jerky and violent. Dante was sitting on the edge of the white sofa, his head in his hands, the picture of a man whose world had just collapsed. When I entered the room, the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Jessica froze. She was holding a pair of red stilettos. She dropped them. She stood up and marched toward me, stopping just inches from my face. The restraining order said 500 feet. But in this living room, the hatred bridged the gap instantly. "You think you won," she spat. "You think because some sentimental judge felt sorry for an old man, you can just kick us out." I leaned on my cane and looked at her. I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt a deep, profound exhaustion. The judge was very clear, "Jessica, you have to leave." "No," she screamed. She reached into her purse and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. It was the deed. The forged deed she had tried to get me to sign, the one she claimed made us co-owners. "We looked it up," she said, waving the paper in my face. "We have rights. This is a joint tenancy. Even if the guardianship was denied, we are still residents. We have established residency. You can't evict us without 30 days' notice. It is the law, Elijah. We are not going anywhere. We are staying right here until we sell this place and get what we are owed." Dante looked up. There was a flicker of hope in his eyes, a pathetic, desperate hope. "She is right, Dad," he said, his voice trembling. "We checked the statutes. You can't just throw us on the street. We own half this house." I looked at my son. I looked at the woman who had turned him into a thief. They were so confident. They thought they knew the rules of the game. They thought this was checkers. They didn't know I had been playing chess since 1990. I walked over to the fireplace. I stood in front of the empty space where the piano used to be. The ghost of that instrument was the strongest presence in the room. I started to laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a dry, dusty sound that scraped against my throat. "Joint tenancy," I repeated. "You think you own half this house." "We do," Jessica insisted, crossing her arms. "Dante is your heir, and I am his wife. That makes this marital property." I reached into the inside pocket of my trench coat. I didn't pull out a gun. I pulled out something far more dangerous. A weathered yellow legal folder bound with a string. The edges were frayed. It smelled of old paper and tobacco smoke from the lawyer's office where it was signed 30 years ago. I slowly unwound the string. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the police officer by the door was watching. "You two are so busy trying to steal my future, you never bothered to look at the past," I said. I opened the folder. "Dante. Do you remember 1990, I asked. You were 8 years old. Mom had just released her 3rd album. We were touring Europe. We had money coming in, but we also had lawsuits. Everyone wanted a piece of Ruby Thorne." Dante stared at me, confused. "What does that have to do with this?" "Everything I said. Your mother was terrified that if something happened to us, the sharks would come for everything. She wanted to make sure that no matter what happened in the music business, this house, her sanctuary, would never be touched." I pulled out the document. The paper was thick cream-colored legal stock. "So in 1990, we didn't just pay off the mortgage," I said. "We transferred the title." I held up the document so they could see the seal. "This house does not belong to Elijah Thorne," I said, my voice rising. "It never has. And it certainly doesn't belong to Dante Thorne." "Then who owns it?" Jessica demanded, her voice wavering. "It belongs to the Ruby Thorne Cultural Preservation Trust," I declared. The words hung in the air. "Trust," Jessica whispered. "What trust?" "The trust your mother established to protect her legacy," I said, looking at Dante. "This house is legally designated as a private archive. I am not the owner. I am merely the trustee, the caretaker. And you, Dante, you were named as a beneficiary. Jessica's eyes lit up. Beneficiary! See, she grabbed Dante's arm. That means he gets the money. That means we can sell it. I shook my head slowly. You didn't let me finish. Being a beneficiary of this trust comes with conditions. Very specific conditions that Ruby wrote herself. She was a woman of detail, your mother. She knew that people change. She knew that money makes people do ugly things. I turned to page 12 of the document. I adjusted my glasses. Clause 4, Section B, I read aloud. The standing of any beneficiary shall be immediately and irrevocably terminated if said beneficiary engages in any action that damages, disparages, or liquidates the artistic assets of Ruby Thorne. I looked up. Jessica's face had gone the color of ash. Let me read the definition of artistic assets, I continued. Artistic assets are defined as original recordings, sheet music, personal instruments, specifically the 1968 Steinway Model B located in the primary residence. Dante made a sound like a wounded animal. He slumped back onto the sofa. He knew. He remembered now. He remembered how his mother used to polish that piano. He remembered how she told him it was the third member of their marriage. You sold the piano, Dante, I said, closing the folder with a snap. It wasn't just a piece of furniture. It was the cornerstone of the trust. By selling it, you didn't just commit a theft. You triggered the disinheritance clause. I walked over to the coffee table and tossed the folder down in front of them. You don't own half this house, I said, my voice cold and hard. You don't own a single brick. You don't own a splinter of wood in the floorboards. As of the moment you took that cash from the piano dealer, you ceased to be a beneficiary. You are legal strangers to this estate. Jessica snatched up the document. Her hands were shaking so badly she tore the edge of the paper. She scanned the lines, her eyes darting back and forth frantically, searching for a loophole, searching for a way out. This can't be legal, she stammered. You can't just write a clause that cuts someone out for selling a piano. It is undue influence. It is a trap. It is not a trap, Jessica, I said. It is a test of character, and you both failed. But we can fix it, Dante cried, standing up. We can get the piano back. If we get it back, does the clause go away? Dad, please. I looked at him. I saw the desperation. I saw the fear of the loan sharks in his eyes. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for a lifeline. It doesn't work that way, son, I said. You broke the seal. The trust is clear. Irrevocable termination. Those are the words. Even if I wanted to help you, I can't. The trust is overseen by a board of directors. Saul is the chairman. And after what you did in court today, Saul isn't feeling very charitable. Jessica dropped the paper. She looked around the room as if she were seeing it for the first time. The white walls she had painted, the modern furniture she had bought on credit, it was all dissolving. You knew, she whispered. You knew this the whole time, when I was renovating, when I was talking about selling. You knew we couldn't sell it. I knew, I admitted, and I tried to warn you. I told you not to touch the piano. I told you not to disrespect the house. But you didn't listen. You were too busy measuring the drapes for a condo in Florida that you were never going to buy. The police officer stepped forward. He had heard enough. Mr. Thorne. Mrs. Thorne, he said, his hand resting on his belt. I think the gentleman has made the legal standing clear. You need to gather your personal effects and vacate the property. Now. But we have nowhere to go, Jessica screamed. She turned on me, her face twisting into a snarl. You are going to let us sleep on the street? Your own son? You are a monster. I am a father, I said, my voice steady. And sometimes being a father means letting your children feel the cold. You wanted to be independent, Jessica. You wanted to be the head of this family. Well, here is your chance. Go out there and build something of your own instead of tearing down what my wife built. Dante stood up slowly. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. Dad, he whispered. The loan sharks. The Russians. If I don't pay them... I looked at him. I knew what he was going to say. He was going to say they would kill him. And for a second I wanted to tell him about the deal I made. I wanted to tell him that I had already shifted the debt, that I was going to use the song royalties to save his life. But not yet. If I told him now, he would never learn. He would think Daddy fixed it again. He would think there are no consequences. He needed to sweat. He needed to fear.
He needed to spend a few nights wondering if the shadows were coming for him. That sounds like a problem for a grown man, Dante, I said. I suggest you find a job. I turned my back on them. Officer, I said, I am going to my study. Please ensure they leave the key to the smart lock on the counter. I walked down the hallway to my room. I heard Jessica screaming. I heard the sound of a suitcase being zipped up violently. I heard Dante sobbing. I went into my study and closed the door. I didn't lock it. I didn't need to. I walked over to the window and looked out at the street. I saw Big Mike's car still parked there watching, waiting. I wasn't a monster. I had protection on them. Big Mike would make sure the Russians didn't touch Dante tonight, but Dante didn't need to know that. Tonight, Dante needed to learn what it felt like to be alone in the dark, just like he had left me alone in this room for weeks. I sat down on the air mattress. It was still uncomfortable. But tonight, it felt like a throne. The house was mine. The legacy was safe. And tomorrow, the piano was coming home. I sat in the high-backed leather chair of my study watching the security feed on my phone. The camera in the living room showed a scene of absolute devastation. Jessica was dragging a suitcase across the hardwood floor, scratching the varnish I had paid a craftsman to restore 10 years ago. Dante was standing by the door, holding a box of his personal belongings, looking like a man who had just survived a plane crash only to find himself stranded on a desert island. They were leaving. The house was mine again. But there was one loose end, one final lesson I had to teach them. Not about the past, but about the future they had just thrown away. I picked up the black notebook. The cover was cracked, the pages yellowed with age. I ran my thumb over the spine, feeling the texture of the leather. This little book was heavier than a brick of gold. I walked out of the study and down the hallway. The sound of my cane tapping on the floor made Dante flinch. He looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen. Jessica didn't look up. She was too busy trying to jam a pile of designer coats into a bag that was too small. Leaving so soon, I asked, my voice echoing in the empty foyer. Jessica zipped the bag with a vicious yank. "We are going, Elijah. Don't worry. You got what you wanted. You get to die alone in your big empty house. I hope the silence drives you mad." I stopped in the middle of the room. "The silence won't drive me mad, Jessica, because it won't be silent. This house is about to be filled with music again." I held up the notebook. "Do you know what this is?" I asked. Jessica glanced at it with disdain. "Another old diary? Who cares?" Dante looked at it closer. He squinted. That looks like Mom's handwriting on the cover." "It is," I said. "It is the notebook Andre found inside the piano." "The piano you sold for $4,000? Jessica rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, are we still talking about that stupid piano? We get it, Elijah. We made a mistake. We didn't check the antique value. Move on." I smiled. A cold, sharp smile. It wasn't the antique value, Jessica. It was the content. You see, Ruby didn't just play the piano. She wrote on it. And when she wrote, she didn't trust record labels. She wrote everything down right here. I opened the book to a random page. "This is a song called Chicago Rain," I said. She wrote it in 1982. It was never released, never recorded. No one knew it existed except me and her. "So what?" Jessica snapped. "It's an old song. Who listens to that anymore?" I closed the book. "Sony Music does," I said, "and Universal, and Warner Brothers." The room went quiet. Dante took a step forward. "What do you mean, Dad?" he asked. "I mean that this morning while you were getting dressed for court, I was on a conference call with the head of acquisitions at Blue Note Records," I said. "Saul sent them scans of these pages last night. They verified the handwriting. They analyzed the composition." "And?" Jessica asked, her greed suddenly cutting through her anger. "And they offered me a deal," I said. "A global distribution deal for the lost sessions of Ruby Thorne. They want to release a posthumous album. They want to license the songs for movies and commercials. They think it will be the biggest jazz release of the decade." I paused, letting the weight of the words settle on them. "I signed the contract at 9 a.m., I said. "The advance payment just hit the wire transfer." "How much?" Jessica whispered. She dropped the bag she was holding. Her hands were trembling. $2 million, I said. $2 million. The number hung in the air like a physical object. I saw Dante's knees buckle. I saw Jessica's eyes dilate. $2 million. It was the exact number she had mentioned at the party. It was the price of her freedom, the The price of the condo in Florida, the price of my life. That's our money, Jessica screamed, lunging forward. The police officer stepped in between us, his hand on his chest, pushing her back. That is marital assets, she yelled over the officer's shoulder. Dante is the heir. Ruby was his mother. That money belongs to the family. I shook my head slowly. You are not listening, Jessica. You never listen. You only hear what you want to hear. I tapped the notebook with my finger. This notebook was found inside the piano. The piano is property of the trust. Therefore, the notebook is property of the trust. And any income generated from the notebook belongs to the trust. So? Jessica panted, pushing her hair out of her face. We are family. The trust is for the family. Not anymore, I said. Remember the clause? Irrevocable termination. You are not beneficiaries. You are strangers. That means I continued, enjoying the look of horror spreading across her face, that the $2 million does not go to me. It does not go to Dante. It goes directly into the bank account of the Ruby Thorn Cultural Preservation Trust. And what does the trust do with it? Dante asked, his voice barely a whisper. We give it away, son, I said. We give it to music schools. We give it to inner-city arts programs. We give it to kids like Andre the boy who saved this book while you were trying to sell it for scrap. Jessica let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. No, you can't do that. You can't give $2 million to strangers while your own son is being hunted by loan sharks. I looked at Dante. He was pale as a sheet. Dad, please, he begged. The Russians, they will kill me. Just give me a loan. 500,000. That's all I need. I will pay you back. I swear. I looked at him. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to say, I already fixed it, Dante. I used the first royalty check to buy your debt, but I couldn't. He needed to feel this loss. He needed to understand the magnitude of his stupidity. I can't, Dante, I said. My hands are tied. The trust is a legal entity. I can't just withdraw money for personal debts. That would be embezzlement. And I am not a criminal. Unlike some people in this room. Jessica fell to her knees. She wasn't praying. She was breaking. She crawled toward me, pushing past the officer, grabbing the hem of my trench coat. Elijah, please, she sobbed. I am sorry. I am so sorry. We made a mistake. We were desperate. Please don't let us leave with nothing. $2 million. We could split it. We could take care of you. We could be a family again. I looked down at her. I looked at the woman who had thrown my heart medication in the trash. The woman who had called me a vegetable. The woman who had planned to wait for me to die. I pulled my coat from her grip. You wanted a return on investment, Jessica, I said, my voice cold as the Chicago wind. You are a businesswoman, right? You like numbers. Let's look at the numbers. I pointed to the empty spot where the piano had stood. You had a winning lottery ticket sitting right there, a legacy worth millions. And you sold it. How much did you get for it, I asked. 4,000, she whispered into the floor. $4,000, I repeated. You traded $2 million for $4,000. I leaned down close to her ear. That is a loss of $1,996,000, Jessica. That is the cost of your arrogance. That is the price of your ignorance. You thought you were selling old wood. You were selling your own future. I stood up and straightened my coat. And the irony is, I added, looking at Dante, if you had just been patient, if you had just treated me with dignity, if you had just waited, you would have inherited it all. The house, the piano, the songs, the money. It was all going to be yours eventually. Dante looked at me, his face crumbling. I disinherited myself, he whispered. Yes, you did, I said. You cut your own throat to save a few pennies. Officer, I said, turning to the policeman. I think they are ready to leave now. The officer nodded. Ma'am, let's go, he said gently, lifting Jessica to her feet. She didn't fight him this time. The fight had gone out of her. She looked hollowed out. She looked at the door, then at me, then at the notebook in my hand. You are the devil, she whispered. No, Jessica, I said, holding the door open for them. I am just a producer, and I just cut you from the track. They walked out into the night. Dante dragged his feet, looking back one last time at the warm glow of the hallway. He looked like Adam being kicked out of Eden. I watched them get into their car. It was Jessica's luxury SUV, but I knew the repo man would be coming for it soon. I closed the door. The click of the latch was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I was alone. The house was empty. The money was safe. But I wasn't done yet. I walked back to the study. I sat down at my desk and pulled out a clean sheet of paper. I had to write a letter. A letter to a Mr. Volkov in Cicero. Dear Mr. Volkov, enclosed is a cashier's check for $350,000. This covers the principal and interest on the loan taken out by Dante Thorne. As per our agreement, the debt is settled. However, I request one final service. Do not tell him it is paid. Let him sweat for a month. Let him look over his shoulder. Let him learn what fear tastes like. Then send him a receipt. Mark it. Paid in full by Elijah Thorne. Sincerely, the ghost of Chicago jazz. I signed the letter. I put the check in the envelope. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. I could hear music in my head. A new melody. It was sad, but it was strong. It was the sound of a man who had lost his family but found his dignity. Play it again, Ruby, I whispered. Play it one more time. The arrival of the Cook County Sheriff's deputies changed the energy in the room instantly. Before, it was just a family argument, a dispute between a father and his son. But when those uniforms walked through the door, the abstract concept of the law became a physical reality. There were two of them. Big men with stone faces and utility belts that creaked when they moved. They didn't care about the family drama. They didn't care about the tears. They had a court order signed by Judge Moore, and their only job was to clear the building. The lead officer, a sergeant with graying hair and a name tag that read Kowalski, stepped into the center of the living room. He looked at the chaos of open suitcases and scattered clothes. He looked at Jessica, who was frantically stuffing silverware into her purse. He looked at Dante, who was sitting on the floor, staring at nothing. Folks, the sergeant said, his voice deep and bored. You have exactly 15 minutes to vacate the premises. Whatever is not out the door in 15 minutes stays here. And if you are not out the door in 15 minutes, you will be removed for trespassing. Do I make myself clear? Jessica spun around. Her eyes were wild. 15 minutes? That is impossible. We live here. We have furniture. We have appliances. You can't just expect us to leave everything behind. The sergeant didn't blink. The order says personal effects. Only, ma'am, clothing, toiletries, necessary medication, anything attached to the property or purchased for the maintenance of the property stays. Jessica let out a screech of frustration. She ran to the wall where the massive 85-inch television was mounted. It was the television she had forced me to buy 3 months ago because she said the old one hurt her eyes. She started clawing at the mounting brackets, trying to rip it off the wall. "Dante, help me!" she yelled. "Grab the other side! This is ours!" Dante didn't move. He just watched her. Jessica pulled harder. The bracket groaned but held fast. She was going to rip the drywall out before she got that TV down. One of the deputies stepped forward. He placed a large hand on Jessica's shoulder. "Ma'am, stop," the deputy said firmly. "Step away from the electronics." Jessica whirled on him. "Get your hands off me! I bought this! It is mine! I have the receipt!" The deputy looked at me. I stood by the fireplace, leaning on my cane, watching the spectacle. "Is that true, Mr. Thorne?" the deputy asked. "Did she purchase this item?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened my banking app. I scrolled down to a transaction from 3 months ago. "She bought it, officer," I said calmly. "But she used the credit card ending in 5548. That is the American Express card issued to the Elijah Thorne Revocable Trust. It is a business expense account for household maintenance." I turned the phone so the sergeant could see. Legally speaking, I continued the trust purchased that television. Mrs. Thorne was merely the unauthorized agent who swiped the card. Therefore, the television belongs to the trust. Jessica's face went purple. "Unauthorized agent? You gave me that card. You said I could buy what was needed for the house." "I said you could buy groceries, Jessica," I corrected her. "Not a $4,000 home theater system. You spent my money. You bought trust property. And now it stays with the trust." The sergeant nodded. He looked at Jessica. "You heard the man, ma'am. Leave the TV. Empty the purse, too. I saw you put the silver in there." Jessica froze. She looked at the sergeant, then at her purse. "Empty it," the sergeant barked. "Now." With a trembling hand, Jessica upended her Louis Vuitton bag onto the sofa. Forks, spoons, and a heavy silver ladle clattered onto the cushions. It was my mother's silver. The set we only used for Christmas. She was stealing the family silver like a common burglar. Dante looked at the pile of silver. He looked sick. "Jess," he whispered, "what are you doing?" "I am taking what we are owed," Jessica screamed at him. "We are leaving with nothing. Dante, nothing. Look at you sitting there like a lump while your father strips us bare." She grabbed the empty bag. "Fine. Keep your stupid spoons. Keep your TV. I don't want anything from this cursed house." She ran to the hallway and grabbed her suitcase. She was moving fast now, fueled by pure adrenaline and hatred. She threw open the front door and started dragging her bags down the steps. The wheels bumped loudly against the wood, a rhythmic thudding that sounded like a heartbeat. Dante was the last one left. He stood up slowly. He looked around the room. He looked at the empty space where the piano used to be. He looked at the kitchen where he had eaten thousands of meals. He looked at the photos on the mantle, photos of him graduating high school, photos of him and me fishing on Lake Michigan. He picked up a small cardboard box. It held a few shirts, his laptop, and a pair of running shoes. That was it. 38 years of life reduced to one box. He walked toward me. He stopped a few feet away. He looked terrified. The reality of the night was finally hitting him. The sun would go down soon. He had no money. He had no credit. He had dangerous men looking for him. And now he had no roof. "Dad," he said, his voice cracking. I looked at him. I kept my face stern, but inside my heart was breaking. This was my boy. This was the baby I had rocked to sleep. This was the toddler I had taught to walk. "Dad, please," he said, tears spilling over his cheeks. "I know I messed up. I know I was weak, but you can't do this. I have nowhere to go. Jessica's friends won't take us. My friends. I don't have any friends left." He took a step closer. "I am scared, Dad. I don't know how to survive out there. I have never been on my own." I gripped my cane tighter. This was the moment of maximum danger. If I gave in now, if I handed him a wad of cash or told him he could stay in the guest room, the lesson would be lost. He would never grow. He would stay a child, forever terrified and dependent. I had to be the rock, even if it crushed him. "You are scared," I said, my voice low and steady. "Good. You should be scared. Dad." "For 38 years, Dante, I stood between you and the world," I said. "I paid the bills. I fixed the mistakes. I caught you every time you fell. And because of that, you never learned how to stand. You never developed the muscles a man needs to survive." I pointed to the door. "That world out there is cold, son. It doesn't care who your father is. It doesn't care about your excuses. It only cares about what you can do. And right now you can't do anything because you have never had to trying. But tonight," Dante cried, "just for tonight. Let me sleep on the couch. I will leave in the morning." "No," I said. "If you stay tonight, you will stay tomorrow, and the next day, and next week you will be asking me for money again, and next month you will be forging my signature again." I looked him deep in the eyes. "I love you, Dante. I love you enough to let you fail. I love you enough to let you hit the bottom so you can finally find out what you are made of." "But where do I go?" he sobbed, clutching his box. I looked past him out the open door to the streetlights flickering on. "You go anywhere, Dante," I said. "You go to a shelter. You go to a motel. You go sleep in your car. It doesn't matter where you go." I looked back at him. "As long as you get there on your own 2 feet." Dante stared at me. He was waiting for the punchline. He was waiting for the hug. He was waiting for me to say, "Just kidding." But I didn't. I just stood there, a statue of an old man guarding his castle. The sergeant checked his watch. "Time is up, folks," he said. "Let's move it along." Dante wiped his nose with his sleeve. He looked at me one last time with a look of pure betrayal. "I hate you," he whispered. I nodded. "I know, son. That is the price of admission today." He turned and walked out. He didn't look back. He walked down the steps past the police cruiser, past Jessica, who was screaming into her phone by the curb. He walked into the darkness of the street, his shoulders hunched, his box held tight against his chest. I watched him go. The sergeant walked over to the door. "You want me to lock this up, Mr. Thorne?" he asked. "No," I said. "I will do it." I walked to the door. I looked out at the night. I saw the taillights of Jessica's car flare red as she peeled away, leaving Dante standing on the sidewalk.
I saw him hesitate and then start walking south toward the bus stop. He was walking. He was moving.
"Keep walking, son," I whispered. "Walk until your feet hurt. Walk until you understand." I closed the heavy oak door. I threw the deadbolt. Thunk. The sound echoed through the house. It was a lonely sound. I turned around and faced the empty living room. It was just me now. Me and the ghosts. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hand was shaking. I sat down at the island and let the tears come. I cried for the boy I lost. I cried for the man he failed to become. But as I sat there in the silence, I felt something else underneath the grief. I felt peace. The leeches were gone, the lies were gone, the house was clean. I pulled the phone out of my pocket. I looked at the text message I had drafted to Big Mike. "Keep an eye on him, Mike. Don't let him freeze, but don't let him see you." I hit send. I wasn't heartless. I was just a producer. And sometimes to get the best performance you have, to put the artist in a room by themselves and turn off the lights. Dante's solo had just begun. 30 days had passed since the night the police escorted my son and his wife out of my home. 30 days of silence that wasn't empty but full. The kind of silence that allows a man to think, to breathe, to hear the rhythm of his own heart again. The winter had finally broken in Chicago, giving way to a tentative spring. The ice on the lake was melting and the wind had lost its bite, replaced by a breeze that smelled of wet earth and possibility. I stood in my living room watching the movers. They weren't the rough, careless men who had hauled my life away months ago. These were professionals, men who treated wood like flesh. They wore white gloves. They moved with a slow, deliberate cadence. Steady on the corner, one of them whispered, "Watch the leg." I held my breath as they lowered the Steinway onto the Persian rug I had bought to replace the one Jessica had thrown out. The piano settled into the floorboards with a heavy, resonant thud. It was the sound of an anchor dropping. It was the sound of a ship coming home. I walked over to it. The finish was gleaming. Andre, the boy who had saved it, had polished it every day he had it in his apartment. I ran my hand along the curve of the lid. It felt cool and smooth like satin. I sat down on the bench. My hips still twinged a little, but I didn't care. I placed my hands on the keys. I played a C major chord. Simple. Fundamental. The sound filled the room, bouncing off the walls that I had repainted a warm, deep terracotta, the color Ruby loved. The echo of Jessica's sterile white hospital ward was gone. The house felt like a home again. It felt like blood was pumping through its veins. But while my house was healing, I knew that somewhere else in the city, another house had fallen apart completely. Saul had given me the update over coffee that morning. It didn't take long for the rats to turn on each other when the ship started sinking. Jessica filed for divorce 3 days after the eviction. She didn't even wait for the ink to dry on the restraining order. As soon as she realized Dante was cut off from the trust, as soon as she realized there was no $2 million payout coming, she cut him loose. She cited irreconcilable differences, but the real difference was in the bank account. She moved back in with her parents in the suburbs, probably spinning a story about how she was the victim of a cruel father-in-law. I didn't care. She was a footnote now, a bad melody in a song I had already faded out. Dante, however, was a different story. Saul told me he had found a studio apartment in Uptown, not the nice part of Uptown, the part where the streetlights are broken and the sirens never stop. It was a single room above a liquor store with a radiator that hissed and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. And he was working. For the first time in his life, my son was doing manual labor. He got a job at the Amazon fulfillment center on the night shift, picking and packing, walking 15 miles a shift on concrete floors, carrying boxes of things other people could afford to buy. I thought about him every night. I thought about his soft hands, blistered and raw. I thought about his back aching the way mine used to ache when I was hauling amplifiers into vans in the 70s. It hurt me to think about it. It hurt me in a place deeper than any bone. But I didn't call him. I didn't send Big Mike to drop off a grocery bag. He needed this. He needed to know what $1 weighed. He needed to know that a roof isn't a right, it is a privilege earned with sweat. Every box he lifted was a lesson. Every night he spent staring at that peeling ceiling was a semester in the school of manhood. I closed the piano lid gently. Tonight wasn't about Dante. Tonight was about the family I had chosen. The smell of charcoal and hickory smoke was drifting in from the backyard. I had fired up the big smoker at noon.
There were 3 racks of ribs inside, rubbed with my secret blend of spices, slow cooking until the meat was ready to fall off the bone. There was brisket. There was cornbread baking in the oven. There were collard greens simmering on the stove with a ham hock just the way Ruby used to make. The doorbell rang. I walked to the door, not with a cane but with a walking stick, a sleek ebony stick with a silver handle that looked less like a medical device and more like an accessory. I opened the door, and Big Mike filled the frame. He was holding a 6-pack of cold beer in one hand and a potato salad in the other. "Smells like heaven in here, boss," Mike rumbled, stepping inside. "It's getting there, Mike," I said. Behind him came Saul. He was wearing a casual shirt, which for Saul meant a dress shirt with the top button undone. He was carrying a bottle of expensive bourbon. "To the victor go the spoils," Saul said, handing me the bottle, "and to the man who got his house back." And finally, walking shyly up the path was Andre. He looked different. He had a haircut. He was wearing a clean shirt. He wasn't the desperate, starving student I had met in that basement anymore. He looked like a young man with a future. "Mr. Thorne," Andre said, smiling. "The house. It looks amazing. Come in, son," I said, clapping him on the shoulder. "And don't call me Mr. Thorne tonight. Call me Elijah. You are part of the band now." We moved to the backyard. The sun was setting, painting the Chicago sky in shades of purple and gold. The food was spread out on the picnic table. We ate like kings. We laughed. We told stories. Big Mike told stories about his days as a bouncer at the jazz showcase. Saul told stories about the wildest contracts he had ever negotiated. And then after the sun went down and the fireflies started to blink in the bushes, we went back inside. Andre sat at the piano. He didn't need sheet music. He just closed his eyes and started to play. He played Ruby's Lament, but he played it with a new confidence. He played it with the joy of someone who knows he has been given a chance. I sat in my armchair holding a glass of bourbon, watching him. This was what I was fighting for. This moment, right here. Not just the wood and the brick, but the spirit, the continuity, the idea that music and love can survive even the ugliest betrayals. Saul leaned over to me. "You know Elijah," he said quietly, so the music wouldn't be disturbed. "I got a letter from Dante today." I stiffened. I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on Andre's hands dancing over the keys. "What did it say?" "It wasn't asking for money," Saul said. "It was short. He said he got his first paycheck. He said his feet hurt, and he said he was sorry he sold the piano, not because of the money, but because he misses hearing you play." I felt a lump form in my throat. I took a sip of the bourbon. It burned going down. "He misses the music," I whispered. "Yeah," Saul said. He asked if maybe in a few months, if he is still holding down the job, he could come by. Just to listen, not to stay. Just to listen from the porch. I looked at the empty glass in my hand. I looked at the walls of my home. It was a fortress, yes. But a fortress with the drawbridge up is just a prison. "Tell him," I said, my voice thick. "Tell him the porch is open." Saul nodded, smiling. "I will tell him. Tell him he can listen," I added. "But he can't come inside. Not yet. He has to finish his shift first." Meaning the warehouse, Saul asked. Meaning life, Saul. He has to finish the shift of becoming a man. When he does that, then we can talk about opening the door. Andre finished the song with a flourish, a beautiful complex chord that hung in the air like a question mark. Everyone clapped. Big Mike whistled. I stood up. My hip didn't hurt at all. "That was beautiful, Andre," I said. "But you missed a note in the second bar." Andre laughed. "I knew you would catch that." I walked over to the piano. "Move over, son," I said. "Let me show you how Ruby used to do it." I sat down next to him on the bench. We played a duet. 4 hands, 2 generations, 1 piano. The music flowed out of the open windows, drifting down the street past the maple trees, past the streetlights, rolling all the way down to the city where a man in a warehouse was lifting a box and thinking about his father. I played for Ruby. I played for me. And in the quietest part of my heart, I played for Dante too. Because the blues isn't about being sad. It is about being broken and finding a way to make it sound beautiful. And tonight, in this house on the south side of Chicago, everything was beautiful. The house was finally quiet, but it was not the empty, hollow silence that Jessica had brought with her minimalist furniture and her cold ambition. It was a warm, living silence. The kind of silence that holds a note after the piano key has been released. I sat at the Steinway. The lid was open. The black lacquer reflected the soft light of the floor lamp, casting long shadows across the room. My hands rested on the keys. They were old hands. The skin was thin like parchment paper and the knuckles were swollen with arthritis, but when they touched the ivory, they remembered everything. They remembered the nightclubs in 1970. They remembered the first time I held Ruby. They remembered the trembling fear I felt when I signed the mortgage papers for this house 40 years ago, wondering if a black musician could really hold on to a piece of the American dream. I played a chord. C minor. It is a sad key, but it is honest. I transitioned into the melody of Midnight in Chicago. It was Ruby's favorite. She wrote it on a napkin in a diner at 3 a.m. after a gig where the promoter had tried to stiff us on the fee. I had fought him for the money, and when we sat down to eat, she looked at me with those eyes that could see right through my armor, and she started humming. I played the bridge now, the part where the melody climbs high, struggling against the bass line before finding resolution. I looked at the silver-framed photograph sitting on the piano lid. It was the only thing I had asked the movers to unpack personally. Ruby was wearing her white stage gown, her head thrown back in laughter, her hand resting on my shoulder. "I protected our house, baby," I whispered to the photo. The sound of my own voice startled me a little. "I held the line, Ruby. They came with their lawyers and their lies and their greed. They tried to strip the paint and sell the soul. But I stopped them. The fortress held. I stopped playing. The vibration of the strings lingered in the air, humming against my chest. On the small table beside the piano sat a stack of documents, fresh, crisp paper. The ink was still drying on the signature I had placed there an hour ago with Saul standing witness. It was my new last will and testament, and the revised charter for the Ruby Thorn Cultural Preservation Trust. I picked up the glass of bourbon and took a slow sip. I looked at the papers. They were not just legal documents. They were a manifesto. I had spent my life building wealth, thinking I was building it for my son. I thought that leaving him a paid-off house and a heavy bank account was an act of love. I thought I was giving him the head start I never had, but I was wrong. I was giving him a crutch. And when you give a man a crutch, he forgets how to walk. The new terms were simple, but ironclad. Upon my death, the house would not go to Dante. It would remain the property of the trust in perpetuity. It would be converted into the Thorn Residency, a housing and recording space for young jazz musicians from the South Side who had the talent but not the means. Students like Andre. They would live here. They would eat in my kitchen. They would play on this piano. The house would never be empty. It would be a factory of dreams just like it was when Ruby and I were alive. And the royalties. The millions that were about to pour in from the release of the Lost Sessions. 80% would go to the scholarship fund. 10% would go to maintenance of the property. And the final 10%. I smiled looking at the clause Saul and I had drafted. We called it the Dante Rehabilitation Protocol. Dante would not receive a lump sum. He would not receive a monthly allowance to sit on a couch and feel sorry for himself. The trust would pay a stipend equal to the minimum wage for 40 hours a week. But to unlock that stipend, Dante had to submit proof of employment. Real employment. Not investment schemes, not crypto trading, W-2 employment. And he had to submit a quarterly certificate of good standing from a court-approved community service program. If he worked, he got help. If he contributed to society, he got support. If he wanted to be lazy, he would starve. It was harsh, I knew that. Some people would call it cruel. Jessica would certainly call it cruel. But Jessica didn't understand the difference between price and value. I was giving Dante the only thing of value I had left to give. I was giving him his dignity back. I was forcing him to earn his bread so that when he finally ate it, it would taste sweet. I stood up and walked to the window. I leaned on my walking stick looking out at the street. The street lights were humming. A car drove by slowly, its bass thumping a rhythm that rattled the window pane. I wondered where Dante was tonight. Was he at the warehouse? Was he sleeping in his studio apartment listening to the neighbors fight through the thin walls? I hoped he was afraid. I hoped he was tired. Because only when you are tired do you stop running from the truth. I wasn't waiting for him to come back and say sorry. Apologies are cheap. I was waiting for him to come back and say I did it. Until then, the porch light would stay off. I turned back to the room. The terracotta walls seemed to glow. The books were back on the shelves. The smell of Jessica's lavender air freshener was gone, replaced by the scent of old paper, lemon oil, and bourbon. I wasn't lonely. People think that living alone in a big house is lonely. They think an old man without his family is a tragedy. But they don't know me. I have my ghosts. I have the music.
I have the satisfaction of knowing that I stared down the barrel of betrayal and didn't blink. I have honor. I walked back to the piano. I sat down one last time. The night was young. I had a bottle of good bourbon. I had a new notebook of blank music paper waiting on the stand. I picked up a pencil. They tried to write the end of my story. They tried to write a tragedy about a senile old victim, but I am Elijah Thorne. I produce my own records, and I decide when the song ends. I put the pencil to the paper. I drew a treble clef. Movement 1, The Awakening. I started to play. A major chord this time, bright, strong, defiant. The music filled the house, pushing back the shadows, filling every corner with life. I was 73 years old. I had a bad hip. I had a broken heart. But as my fingers flew across the keys, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt free. Protecting your legacy requires more than just love. It requires legal preparation and the courage to see people for who they truly are, even if they are your own flesh and blood. Generosity without boundaries is not love. It is an invitation for exploitation. I learned that respect isn't given to the elderly simply because of age. It is commanded by those who know their worth and refuse to compromise their dignity. By safeguarding my assets, I didn't just save a house. I taught my son the hardest yet most necessary lesson of his life: accountability. This is Elijah Thorne signing off. If my story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe. It helps more than you know. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had to make a tough decision to protect your dignity against family? How did you handle it? Let me know below. I read every single comment. Until next time, keep playing your own song.